Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Built Heritage Committee meeting of July 9th, 2024. I'd like to call the members to order. This hybrid meeting is being facilitated through Zoom and is being held on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, the original custodians of the unceded land in which the City of Ottawa is located. We extend our respect to all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people for their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Since this meeting of this committee is being streamed live on the Ottawa City Council YouTube channel, I'd like to remind participants to please keep your microphones muted until I call upon you to speak. For those participating here in the committee room, please use the microphone in front of you and keep your computer muted. I will provide each committee member with the opportunity to ask questions or comment on each item in the order in which they raise their hand in Zoom. The committee coordinator and I will be watching for those cues. Members are also reminded to submit any motions, visual supports, or declarations of interest in writing to the coordinator at their earliest opportunity. Although the deadlines have passed for residents to register to speak and provide written submissions to this committee, residents can still make written submissions to council. Before we proceed, I'd like to ask the committee coordinator to do a roll call of all members. I did receive regrets from member Legault.
Councillor Kelly.
Present.
Member Doty.
Here.
Member Quinn.
Present.
Councillor Troster.
Here.
Member Madigan.
Present.
Councillor Leeper.
Here.
Vice Chair Plount.
Speak.
Chair King.
Here.
We have quorum, Chair.
Thank you so much. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, are the minutes noted on the agenda for June 11th, 2024 confirmed? Confirmed. Thank you so much. I'll proceed with a consent agenda this morning. We will be holding our first item, which is a presentation on the Alexandra Bridge replacement project. We do have, for the next item, an application for demolition and new construction at 381 Kent Street. For this item, the only people who are registered are the application team as well as Heritage Ottawa. I did want to ask Linda Hode of Heritage Ottawa whether she needed to comment on this item if this item received consent of the committee. Thank you so much. Are there any, is there any interest in a presentation or questions to staff on this item? Seeing none, is this report carried? Carried. Carried. Thank you so much. So this report will be submitted to a Planning and Housing Committee on August 28th for consideration.
Chair, may I just make one comment related to the file? It's okay that it carried.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to say that this design has a lot of merit and the community was very receptive to it. I just wanted to register a concern because this is now the second building in Centertown that is coming down in a matter of months that contains basic medical services, including blood work and medical imaging. And when those two buildings, this one and the doctor's building that is the corner of Gilmore and O'Connor, go down, there will be no such services left in the neighborhood. And so I know this is not within the purview of the community, but I did want to mention it, that we have the highest rate of poverty among seniors in my neighborhood. And I routinely hear from seniors that they're very, very worried about this change. So I'm not in opposition to the project. It's completely fine that it carried. I think the design is really sensitive to the heritage considerations, but I just wanted to say this because I did want to mention that the Ontario Heritage Act, there's certain things it cannot preserve, and there is a going concern about the loss of these services. So 2 demolitions in a matter of 2 months coming through committee that represent the loss of these services completely in Centertown are a real problem. So I'm hoping we can see those services established elsewhere in the neighborhood. Thank you very much.
We appreciate those comments, and notwithstanding the fact that it doesn't specifically apply to what we look at the Heritage Committee under the auspices of the Ontario Heritage Act. That is a continuing concern for not just your ward, but across the city. So thank you for acknowledging that here. We appreciate it. We will hold item 5.2, an application to alter 259 Clemo Avenue. We will, since there are registered speakers, we will hold a 5.3 Aberdine Pavilion as there is a presentation. We will hold 5.4, 85, 90 Primrose, 755 Somerset Street West, as there are presentations and delegations, as well as a technical amendment on that item. Item 5.5, designation of Cherry House at 257 Clarence Street. The only registered speaker on this item is Heritage Ottawa, so I just wanted to ask Linda Hode again whether she would need to comment on this item if it was carried by committee. I see that she does not need to comment. Are there any questions to staff or comments on this item? I don't see any hands raised. Is the report carried? Oh, this is Cherry House. Carried? Carried. Thank you. So this report will be submitted to City Council tomorrow on July 10th for consideration. We will hold 5.6 St. Mary's Anglican Church as there's a delegation. We will hold 5.7 50 Carruthers Avenue as there is a delegation. The last item on the agenda is the designation of Lemia Island Water Purification Plant. There is only Heritage Ottawa registered. So once again, I'd just like to ask Linda Hode whether she would need to comment if this item was carried by committee. Okay, so we will hold that item. Thank you so much. So we will proceed with the first item, which is the Alexandra Bridge replacement project. This morning, we will be receiving an update for information concerning the Alexandra Bridge from the Government of Canada. The Government of Canada directed that the bridge be replaced. Public Services and Procurement Canada is the federal government department responsible for the management of the bridge, with the National Capital Commission acting as a partner. The NCC, along with Public Services and Procurement Canada, have been tasked with leading a comprehensive engagement process, along with conducting studies concerning the federal government's bridge replacement project. This report will be for information only, as there is no specific legislative action that the city will recommend to undertake. This update will provide an opportunity for the committee and the public to ask questions concerning the heritage impacts of the project. I will invite our guests to provide their report. You will have 15 to 20 minutes. Thank you for joining us.
So thank you, Chair, and good morning. We're pleased to be here today to present the progress made to date on the Alexandra Bridge replacement project. Before we do start, though, can I confirm we do have a presentation that is being projected and available to the committee today?
Yes, and I believe staff is working on that right now.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and continue. Donc, je m'appelle Stéphane Derry et je suis le directeur général de la gestion des biens et infrastructures à Services publics et Approvisionnement Canada. Pour mettre en contexte, le portefeuille de SPAC comprend un certain nombre de ponts, barrages, autoroutes et infrastructures maritimes à travers le pays. Une partie de notre portefeuille comprend 3 ponts interprovinciaux dans la région de la capitale nationale. Le pont Alexandra, le pont McDonald-Cartier et les traversiers des Chaudières. I'm joined today on my left by Victoria Angel, who is our heritage experts from ERA Consultants, Paul Lebrun, who is our chief engineer for bridges within the National Capital Region with PSPC, Jordan Lane Beveridge to my right, project director at PSPC, Emily Gérard-Ruel from the NCC, and Christopher Meeks also from the NCC. Collectively, we're part of an integrated project team that includes members from PSPC and the NCC and our technical advisor, Arab. Try to get to the next slide here. Perfect, thank you. Donc, la présentation d'aujourd'hui donnera au comité un aperçu du projet de remplacement du pont Alexandra, un résumé des progrès réalisés à date, une discussion sur les études et les analyses en cours, en mettant l'accent sur l'analyse de l'impact sur le patrimoine et diverses considérations de conception qui sont avancées par notre équipe intégrée pour répondre aux nombreux besoins fonctionnels de la communauté. La présentation se terminera par les prochaines étapes et des dates clés. However, before jumping into today's content, I would like the opportunity to share a couple opening remarks. So firstly, we recognize the Alexandra Bridge is an important asset in the broader National Capital Region Transportation Network, which is jointly managed by PSPC, the NCC, and the City of Ottawa. It is one of 6 interprovincial crossings, which also includes the Chief William Commanda Bridge, and carries close to 10% of daily vehicular traffic between the cities of both Gatineau and Ottawa. Secondly, the Alexandra Bridge serves an important component in planning for growth for the communities that they serve. The National Capital Region can be expected to continue to grow in terms of population, knowing that existing Ottawa River crossings and connecting roadways are currently at full capacity during peak periods. Thirdly, the Alexandra Bridge has reached the end of its service life. First opened in 1901, the Alexandra Bridge has now been in service for over 120 years. The bridge's truss design requires significant maintenance due to the large exposed surface areas. Assessments and studies since 2012 have indicated that repairing and retaining the existing bridge is not a feasible option. My colleague Paul Lebrun will get into a little bit more detail in today's presentation regarding that point in particular. Fourthly, repairing and retaining the Alexandra Bridge is simply not a feasible option. Mitigation activities alone cannot sufficiently address technical risks related to the structure's current deterioration and corrosion, noting that the bridge's structural and functional ratings are considered inadequate according to PSPC's Bridge Inspection Manual. In replacing the Alexandra Bridge, we are committed to delivering a replacement bridge that better meets functional requirements of the community and conforms to the most recent Canadian Highway Bridge Design Code. The design of a replacement bridge that captures the symbolism and history of the Alexandra Bridge is an important mandate for our integrated team. It must consider several elements and converge towards a final concept design. Producing a concept that has deep meaning is a fairly involved and sophisticated activity and needs to be balanced key considerations related to heritage requirements, bridge expression, and overall constructability. Lastly, we're not doing this alone. Consultations to date have included Indigenous engagement, public consultation, public advisory groups, independent review panels, and various stakeholders, including the NCC. Focused engagement with committees such as the Ottawa's Built Heritage Committee help ensure that we can both provide and receive important context regarding the advancement of the Alexandra Bridge Replacement Project. Donc, nous espérons que la présentation d'aujourd'hui permettra au comité de mieux comprendre les progrès réalisés à date, les raisons pour le remplacement du pont d'Alexandra et l'importance de l'analyse de l'impact sur le patrimoine dans la conception finale du pont de remplacement. Je vais maintenant passer la parole à Paul Lebrun, notre ingénieur en chef des ponts de la région de la capitale nationale. Paul, à toi.
Merci Stéphane. Are we changing slides or, okay. So next slide, please. Yeah. So I'm sure that, the previous slide. There we go. I'm sure you're aware that the Alexandra Bridge is at the heart of the capital. It's steps away from Parliament Hill and it spans over the majestic Ottawa River. It connects Boulevard des Allumetières in Gatineau to Sussex Drive and Mackenzie in Ottawa. And it's also an important segment of the Confederation Boulevard. Next slide, please. So in Ottawa, the bridge lands at the escarpment between Kaweki Point and Major Hills Park, and it's also a doorway into the Byward Market. Next slide. Du côté de Gatineau, le pont est une porte d'entrée dans l'île, à l'île de Hull. Du côté ouest du pont, on retrouve le musée de l'histoire du Canada. Puis du côté est du pont, on retrouve le parc Jacques-Cartier ainsi que le quai de Hull et la marina. Next. Donc, le pont a été construit entre 1898 et 1901. Le pont était le deuxième lien interprovincial entre les deux villes accessible au public. The bridge, as Stephen just explained, is 120 years old and it's reached the end of its service life. Over time, it's been exposed to the elements, to salt, to wear and tear from vehicles. And all that has led to widespread corrosion as well as several significant structural issues. Despite all our efforts over the last several decades to keep the bridge in service and safe, we've seen from the studies and the inspection reports that the condition of the bridge continues to deteriorate. This would lead to significant work and additional closures in the coming years to try to restore and keep the bridge safe. And as you're aware, in 2019, based on the inspection reports, a life cycle assessment, as well as a risk assessment, the Government of Canada announced that the bridge would be replaced within the next 10 years. Donc, depuis ce temps-là, on a mis en place une équipe de projet intégré pour faire avancer le projet de remplacement.
Next slide, please. So following the decision to dismantle the historic bridge, in the summer and fall of 2023, work began on a series of studies led by the technical advisor team, one of which is a cultural landscape focused heritage impact analysis, or HIA. So HIA is the process that's being employed on the project to understand the heritage value and character defining attributes of the Alexandra Bridge and its prominent cultural landscape setting. And ultimately, the goal of the HIA is to help ensure that these values are carried forward in multiple ways, notably through the design of the new bridge and through commemoration. The goal is also to ensure, of course, that the new bridge harmoniously integrates with its symbolically charged, complex, and very layered setting. Our study area comprises the river-focused lands and waterways bounded by the Chaudière Crossing to the west and the Macdonald-Cartier Bridge to the east. The work itself encompasses historical research, detailed analysis of the contemporary physical and cultural setting and how the historic bridge participates in it. There's heritage value assessment and identification of the tangible and intangible attributes that carry these values. An assessment of the impact of the dismantlement of the historic bridge has been undertaken based on these values and attributes. This then has provided the starting point for the articulation of a future-focused set of cultural landscape objectives and a heritage conservation approach to ensure the development of a bridge design that helps to, in essence, bridge past, present, and future. The HIA process has been happening in parallel and coordinated with the design process, with the HIA team working in close dialogue with the bridge designers. And I'll now highlight aspects of this analysis. Next slide. The setting of the Alexandra Bridge is a composite of intertwined cultural landscapes. The Algonquin Anishinaabeg urban and central capital landscape with the Kitchissippi or Ottawa River at their center. The unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin Anishinaabeg landscape on screen, which has been provisionally mapped but requires proper definition by the Algonquin First Nations themselves, is of course the product of the inhabitation of the lands centered around the Kitchissippi and its shorelines since time immemorial. Its low-lying shorelines have been places for meeting, trade, ceremony, and seasonal encampments. The high ground on the Ottawa side was likely used for lookouts, and the river and portage routes provided access to harvesting areas and connections to kinship networks in all directions. A series of traditional knowledge and yet land use studies led by Algonquin communities are underway and serve as the authoritative sources of information about this landscape. Next slide. The urban landscape emerged after the first permanent European-style settlements were established on both sides of the Kitchissippi or Ottawa River in the early 19th century. At that time, the urban landscape was characterized by primary resource development that relied on the river's water for power and transportation. The Alexandra Bridge itself is associated with a very specific era of the region's development, which saw the expansion of rail transportation in support of resource extraction and Ottawa's development as the capital of an emerging nation. This is a landscape that was focused on movement of goods and people, and with industrial and commercial development on both sides of the Ottawa River. And it was part of, and sometimes in tension with, the capital landscape. Half a century after its construction, the rails were removed from the Alexandra Bridge and the surrounding infrastructure was transformed to accommodate exclusively vehicular traffic and pedestrian routes. Within the cores of Gatineau and Ottawa, former railscape corridors and industrial lands became part of the growing parkland, with ribbons of green spaces along waterways and through spaces that had once housed smokestacks and steam trains. Over time, the crossing also became a critical community connection point, both physically and symbolically, in a region that is often marked by boundaries and divisions. The Alexandra Bridge is not considered as belonging to either Ottawa or Gatineau. The crossing is symbolically shared by both sides of the Kitchissippi or Ottawa River. Next slide. The central capital landscape is a designed and evolving landscape that has developed in tandem with the evolution of Canada's national identities and with capital planning. Originating with the creation of Parliament Hill and the Parliament buildings in the 19th century, it expanded gradually to encompass the river-focused lands on both sides of the Ottawa River, connected by bridges, including the Alexandra Bridge, and more recently a ceremonial ring road, which we know as Confederation Boulevard, of which the bridge is part. Many elements of the historic railscape and industrial landscapes of the region have become part of the central capital landscape and contribute to its character and identity. And at present, we're witnessing a gradual transformation of this landscape through the renewal and emergence of Indigenous patterns of use and activity, and through a variety of projects and initiatives. Examples include the Museum of History, Kiweki Point, the Future Block 2 project, and many others, all of which are recontextualizing and reimagining colonial dimensions of this setting. Next slide. This diagram, which was drawn by the project's lead structural engineer, endeavors to represent the three landscapes, their overlaps and interconnections, the relationship to the river, and the Alexandra Bridge, whose role and relationship with each of these landscapes is distinct. As indicated, these landscapes are not distinct from each other, nor are they equal in their legibility, their integrity, or their intactness. They're tangled up with each other, evolving unevenly and in constant dialogue. Their meanings generated through the interplay of physical elements and patterns of use. Through cultural landscape analysis, we've identified 4 high-level themes that represent both sustained patterns within this setting across landscapes, eras, and cultures, and which serve as starting point for bridge design. They are evolving relationships to land, a landscape of connection, which has moved people across the region, brought diverse groups together, and inspired unity across borders. A living experiential landscape which speaks to shifting human relationships with the Ottawa River over time, and a symbolic landscape tied to capital and Canadian identities. Next slide. Looking at the immediate setting of the Alexandra Bridge highlights both the extraordinary sensitivities of this prominent setting, as well as opportunities for the bridge project. On the Gatineau side of the Kitchissippi or Ottawa River, one notes the sensitive river shoreline, Museum of History in Jacques Cartier Park, which the historic bridge, designed to respond to the former industrial activities of this location, did not address. As well, although this area with its accessible shoreline was a location of gatherings, seasonal encampments, burials, and portage routes since time immemorial, one notes that these patterns are no longer legible due to forced displacement and the emergence of the urban and capital landscapes. Next slide. On the Ottawa side of the river, in addition to Parliament Hill, we have the Rideau Canal World Heritage Site, Majors Hill Park, the National Gallery, and Kiweki Point. Something previously noted, especially on Parliament Hill and Kiweki Point, is the sensitive renewal and transformation underway. This renewal is taking place in ways that balance a respect for history and heritage, while at the same time expressing 21st century aspirations, notably ones related to truth and reconciliation, accessibility and inclusion, ecological restoration, and sustainability. These projects are also recognizing in important ways the centrality of the Kitchissippi or Ottawa River across cultures and eras. Through our cultural landscape analysis, Indigenous engagement process, an assessment of the value and meaning of the Alexandra Bridge as an engineering work, as a form of architecture, and as a multi-sensory experience of the river and public space for communities and tourists, we are working to bridge past, present, and future to commemorate what will be lost through the dismantlement of the historic bridge, but also to carry forward value-bearing aspects of the bridge and its role in its evolving urban and capital setting through the design of the new bridge. Back to Paul.
So in addition to the heritage impact assessment, which is informing the project team, we've got numerous other aspects that the team is using to advance the design concepts. And over the next few slides, I'll go over some of those. Next slide. So some of the fundamental documents that we're using and that's guiding the team are the planning and design principles, as well as the performance criteria for bridge design. So these two documents were approved by the NCC Board of Directors a few years ago. They give us clear criteria to meet, and they're also a transparent process which we can use to design the new bridge. We also have the detailed project description that was produced by the team. It was presented to the Impact Assessment Agency, and based upon the strength of that document, the Impact Assessment Agency decided to pull out of the impact assessment and let PSPC manage that. Next slide. So through some of these documents, the public consultations, engagement with our partners, functional needs were established for the replacement bridge. So starting on the left or on the west of the side of the bridge, we're looking at having a lookout area where people can stop, sit down, stand up, enjoy the views from the bridge. We're looking at having a pedestrian walkway, something that's wider than the existing bridge. Separate from that, we'll have bidirectional cycling lanes. Again, those would be wider than what's on the existing bridge. And to the right, on the east side of the bridge would be 2 traffic lanes, so 1 in each direction. For now, they'd be used by vehicles or public transit. But the lanes and the bridge would be designed to welcome a tramway, should a tramway be required on the bridge in the future. Next. So various design strategies that we're looking at. So on the North Shore, dans le parc Jacques Cartier, we want to make that area more permeable. So right now it's heavily, it's dense because of the current structure that's there. What we're looking at is opening up that space and improving the connectivity between the bridge and the cycle paths as well as the shoreline. One way of doing that is looking at a slight adjustment in the location of the bridge. So maybe a different alignment slightly downstream. Next slide, please. So these are 5 design strategies that are also guiding us. So number 1, in terms of piers in the water to support the structure, we're looking at having the same amount that are currently there or less to try to open up that space under the river. In terms of height of the structure, we're looking at respecting the topography. So nothing that is significantly higher than the topography that's there or some of the cultural buildings that are there. Third, in terms of structure above deck, we're looking at something that's appealing, that has architectural features that will resonate with the community. Similar underneath, if you look at number 4, we're also looking at making something that has architectural features under the bridge. So if you're on the water or in the park, you've got something beautiful to look at. And then lastly, in terms of the navigable waterway, we're looking at maintaining the current waterway, so similar dimensions. Next slide. Over to Jordan, I believe.
Thank you, Paul. One of the first steps in this process was to proceed with an impact assessment, as this project is subject to the Impact Assessment Act. We submitted a detailed project description, which includes foreseeable impacts, identification of foreseeable impacts before, during, and after construction, as well as mitigation and follow-up measures. The Impact Assessment Agency of Canada reviewed this document, and in March of last year, considered the document complete, and we are now in the process of fulfilling our legislative requirements with respect to the environment. Next slide, please. So this is the study area, and it provides a picture of the terrestrial and aquatic and biophysical environment of the project area. There are many species that occupy this area, and the ecological studies are underway to characterize the natural environment near the bridge and to further develop mitigation measures. Next slide, please. The team, as we have seen, is made up of PSPC and NCC employees who are excellent. And in order to continue our studies as well as further define our bridge design concepts, we have contracted a consultant, Europe Canada Incorporated, who is world-class, and they're supporting the team throughout the development of studies as well as processes. With respect to the groups that we are engaging with, the objective and the challenge is to bring the interests of each of these groups together towards and into a final design concept. As you can see, and probably the most important chapter in this process is our engagement with Indigenous communities. We have to date engaged with 19 different communities from 3 different nations. There are public consultations. There have been 2 rounds to date of public consultations in October 2020, November 2021, with one upcoming in October of this year. There's the Public Advisory Committee, which brings together representatives from various spheres of the community. There's engagement with all stakeholders who will be directly affected by the work. The team and the project also benefits from the expertise of 2 of NCC's national expert committees, the Advisory Committee on Planning, Design, and Real Estate, ACPDAR, and the Advisory Committee on Universal Accessibility, ACUA. A committee of independent experts has also been established through the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada to support the team in the development of design options. All of these conversations, feedback, and thinking are going to flow into the final design concepts for this bridge, which, as I mentioned, will be shown in October of this year. Next slide, please. Bit of a snapshot of where we are now. And we are currently in the planning phase and working on studies and concepts. We'll have a design phase proceeded, and construction will start in 2028 and we expect to be completed in 2032. Next slide, please. The Alexandra Bridge has served the Ottawa-Gatineau area very well. However, it has surpassed its initial functionality. As demonstrated by my colleagues earlier in this presentation, now is the time to replace it. It also puts us in a position to seize many opportunities, such as improved mobility for active transportation. The new bridge will have gentler slopes and will also allow for better segregation of users, i.e. pedestrians and cyclists, while creating far more inclusive public spaces. In keeping with the long-term vision for the National Capital Region, the new bridge will be designed to allow for the conversion of vehicular lanes to streetcar lanes. This provides the Ottawa-Gatineau region with the opportunity to adapt to new urban travel standards in the years to come. The views from the bridge. The current views from the bridge are currently studied in order to preserve and even improve these perspectives. We have two jewels in this area, Ottawa-Gatineau. We are going to improve the viewpoints from the bridge. On the Gatineau side, the new structure will offer the opportunity to improve connectivity and accessibility along the river, something that the people are asking for. The project also offers the opportunity to introduce subtle variations to improve and modernize Confederation Boulevard. There are many other opportunities that will be revealed as we continue through this process and as we continue to meet with our very important stakeholders and public groups. Next slide, please. Finally, next steps. So we are currently working on bridge design options. And as I said, we expect to present these in early October of this year. In fall, the Board of Directors from the NCC and public consultations will have feedback on the design options. In winter, we'll pursue design in view of a preferred concept. And finally, in spring of 2025, the preferred concept will be submitted for approval by the NCC's Board of Directors. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for your presentation. We do have a number of registered speakers, so we'll start with the speakers first, and then we'll be able to come back to you for questions from the committee. Our first registered speaker is Josiah Firth. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, esteemed members of the Built Heritage Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. My name is Josiah Frith. I'm here on behalf of the Lower Town Community Association, the Alexandra Bridge Coalition, and as a member of the Public Advisory Group on the Alexandra Bridge Replacement Project, to advocate for the restoration of the Alexandra Bridge, a vital and historic link between Ottawa, Orlando, and Gatineau, Quebec. Ontario, sorry. This presentation will cover key themes, including heritage conservation, progress of the health of cities, celebrating our national engineering achievements, and the proposal of a new bridge to the east. Heritage and conservation. As a resident of Lower Town, my own home was built in 1872. Some born in my house likely worked on this bridge or used it every day. Many other families have come and gone from my home and the homes around it. We, caretakers of history, have sacrificed blood, sweat, tears, and cash for our duty to maintain the history of our community and those who came before us. We battle daily with the forces of nature and the individuals that wish to demolish our work for monetary gain or move a few zeros on a spreadsheet. Heritage buildings may be a question of taste, but taste is determined by the environment one grows up in. Exposure to heritage should not be through a lens of neglect and disgust, but of reverence and pride. All levels of government need to set an example as the main caretakers of our shared history. If they won't take it seriously, then who will? The Alexandra Bridge, completed in 1901, is a testament to our rich engineering heritage. It is not just a bridge, but a symbol of our history and innovation. In 1946, a major fire destroyed about 1/3 of the bridge deck, leading to a major rehabilitation. In 1995, it was designated a National Historic Civil Engineering Site by Canada Society for Civil Engineering. In 2010, a heritage value assessment by PSPC themselves rated the bridge as an engineering asset of national historic importance. Most recently, in 2021, the bridge was added to the National Trust for Canada's Endangered Places list. Restoring this iconic structure aligns with the principles of heritage conservation, which emphasize the importance of preserving historical materials and respecting the original fabric of significant sites. By restoring the Alexandra Bridge, we honor our past and ensure that future generations can appreciate the engineering marvel. Progress and health of cities. Downtown Ottawa is struggling following the pandemic, so a focus on amenities and lifestyle is very important. The restoration of the Alexandra Bridge into something like the High Line in New York City would be a centerpiece of healthy living connecting our two downtowns. This transformation would not only help cap the pollution, but also enhance the lifestyle and amenities available downtown. Imagine a vibrant pedestrian-friendly space that provides a beautiful, accessible area for walking, cycling, community activities. Additionally, maintaining this vital link ensures that our cities remain connected and accessible, fostering economic growth and social cohesion. This is the type of leadership needed for the future of downtown living. 3, national pride and engineering accomplishments. Canada has a proud history of engineering achievements, from the construction of the Canadian Pacific Railway to the Canadarm. The Alexandra Bridge is a part of this legacy. Restoring it not only preserves a piece of our engineering history, but also showcases our commitment to maintaining and celebrating our national accomplishments. It stands as a reminder of the ability to overcome challenges and innovate for the future. It's worth noting that the Alexandra Bridge has already been rebuilt once after it was partially destroyed by fire almost 80 years ago. They didn't have to tear it down to fix it, and it has lasted this long since. All built objects need to be maintained. There can be no view of building anything that doesn't include maintenance. Additionally, the bridge was built by using the same technology as the Eiffel Tower, and shortly after it was presented at the World's Fair. This connection to such significant global icon of engineering further underscores the bridge's importance of the ingenuity of its construction. 4, sharing the wealth for the suburbs and rural areas. While the restoration of the Alexandra Bridge is crucial, we must also consider the needs of our suburban and rural communities. Currently, the city of Gatineau is expanding rapidly to the east, and the towns of Orleans and Rockland as well. I propose that the federal government allocate funds to construct the new bridge to the east. This would not only improve connectivity and economic opportunities for those regions, but also demonstrate a commitment to equitable infrastructure development across all areas. In conclusion, the restoration of Alexandra Bridge is not just about preserving a piece of history, it is about promoting sustainable urban development, celebrating our national engineering achievements, enhancing the health and well-being of our cities, and ensuring equitable infrastructure for all regions. I urge the Built Heritage Committee to support this vital project and help us continue maintain a stronger, more connected Canada. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your delegation. I don't see any questions, so thank you so much. Just a reminder, of course, that we don't have any legislative action before us. This is an additional opportunity for the federal government through Public Works, as well as the National Capital Commission, to hear more inputs, additional inputs from the public. So we're thankful that they've provided us with that opportunity. The next registered speaker is Leslie Maitland. Thank you so much for joining us, and you have 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Chair King and councillors, for the opportunity to speak to you today. I should just say what Josiah said. I would like to, on behalf of Heritage Ottawa, our comments, of course, are focused on the heritage that is encapsulated in the bridge itself. It is certainly true that the setting is significant, but one of the reasons why the setting is significant is because the bridge is there. And I think there has been a premature leapfrog from looking at the current condition of the bridge, presuming it's going to be a vehicular bridge, and not considering the possibility of stabilizing the bridge for active transportation. So as Josiah noted, this bridge has been identified by the Canadian Society of Civil Engineering as evidence of the outstanding ingenuity and foresight of Canadian engineers. And it has been pointed out that this bridge carries something like 10% of the vehicular traffic that is interprovincial, but it also carries 40% of the active transportation. 40%. That is a significant number of people who use that bridge for active transportation. So there's already a willing clientele, so to speak, for a bridge that supports active transportation. I'm not aware that there has been any study of what would be required for this to be converted strictly to active transportation. This can be done. And in that regard, I would like to congratulate the City of Ottawa for converting the Prince of Wales Railway Bridge to the William Commanda Active Transportation Bridge. This certainly didn't cost hundreds of millions of dollars, which the removal of the Alexandra Bridge and its replacement by a signature bridge will cost. So congratulations for your foresight, for embracing sustainability, and also for your fiscal responsibility. The proponents will tell you that bridges have a lifespan. Years don't really mean anything where maintenance is up to standards. There are many bridges around the world that are still standing, and because of their regular maintenance. Older bridges than this, such as the Brooklyn Bridge from 1883, the Menai Suspension Bridge from 1826, which is still in use, and closer to home, the Quebec Bridge of 1917, where the federal government has committed to spending $1 billion over the next 25 years so that its life will be extended for decades. And that's a quote from the PSBC website. Thank you. So this can be done. I'm not an engineer, but I think due diligence would suggest that it is worthwhile to look into repurposing the bridge for active transportation, whether that would help to alleviate this building a bridge to the standards of vehicular traffic. I think it behooves us to keep an open mind about that option and rather leapfrogging to the decision to demolish. Here's the thing. This is what I'm worried is going to happen. Canadians don't care about bridges in Ottawa. You're never going to get an $800 million Renzo Piano Bridge in Ottawa. Canadians won't even pay to put the Prime Minister in a house. He lives in a cottage in the woods like he's some kind of hobbit. So, and I have this from the mouth of a former federal cabinet minister. Canadians don't care about bridges in Ottawa. So I fear that the bridge will be torn down and nothing will be replacing it, or we'll get, a not very attractive flat top as sort of the basic minimum that we'd be willing to pay for. That's my concern. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for your delegation. I do see a question from Vice Chair Plante.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a quick question because I was curious about that too. People are loving the pedestrianization of this bridge. So am I correct that there's been no study about just keeping it pedestrianized and doing sort of renovating to the bridge with that aspect in mind? Did I hear you correctly?
That's my understanding, but I'm prepared to be corrected. And if it's a publicly available study?
Thank you. So we did get a study completed. It was completed in 2022 by Tetra Tech. It looked at the feasibility of maintaining the structure over the next 75 years. The conclusion of the report is that no matter what is put on the bridge, whether it's vehicles or active transportation only, you come to the same conclusion that the bridge needs to be replaced. So we can share that study. It's publicly available.
Oh, is it on your website yet?
You have to request it through the website, but it's listed as one of the documents that's available, yes.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah, j'aimerais une copie aussi, si possible. Merci.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your delegation. The next registered speaker is David Jeets.
Thank you, Chair King. I'm a member of the Public Advisory Committee. I'm also a member of the Alexandra Bridge Coalition and representing Transport Action. So my primary concern about the bridge is its use for active transport, which you've heard about, and the potential for use for a tramway or LRT connection. However, I also have a long-standing interest in the heritage, particularly the railway heritage. In fact, in 2001, I organized a centenary event at the bridge with the Bytown Railway Society, Transport Action, Department of Civil Engineering from Carleton University, a number of local and federal politicians, and the STO, who even provided a bus to exactly represent the first train to cross the bridge 100 years earlier. I've given many talks about the bridge to the Gatineau Valley Historical Society, Heritage Ottawa, various railway groups. I've written articles, and particularly I've recently given guided tours for Heritage Ottawa, which have been very popular, usually sold out. I'm also part of a group that has been promoting a streetcar or tramway loop. But let's talk about the bridge. So as you've heard, it is a unique part of the engineering and transportation history of Canada and the region. It was built by locally owned railways. Some people forget that. And built by a Canadian company, Dominion Bridge, which subsequently was responsible for the infrastructure of many of Ottawa's most important buildings. But the Alexandra Bridge was one of their first projects here. It was subsidized by the City of Ottawa specifically to ensure that it would have dedicated pedestrian corridors for active transportation as well as road use in addition to the railway purpose. And it was important to the City of Gatineau for transportation because it was used for 45 years by the Hull Electric Railway. So their streetcars could come right to the Chateau Laurier. It was part of the Transcontinental Railway of the CPR from 1902 to 1966. And as you've heard, it was designated as a Canadian Civil Engineering Heritage Site by the Canadian Society of Civil Engineers. When it was built, it was the fourth longest cantilever span in the world. And in fact, it is still the oldest cantilever bridge in Canada, still standing at its original location. It was the predecessor to the Quebec Bridge, which has also been mentioned, built 16 years later, but by the same engineers from Dominion Bridge who built the Alexandra Bridge. And that Quebec Bridge, in addition to having a future, as you've heard, is still the world's longest cantilever span. With respect to the maintenance of the bridge, I actually raised concern in the media quite prominently back in 2009 about corrosion reports which had been prepared for Public Works. And in fact, that led to announcement of a major remediation program by the Minister of Public Works, which was carried out at that time. So we've certainly known about the corrosion for a long time. In fact, enough time to do more about remediating it than perhaps we have done. The bridge has an iconic presence. Remember that it can be viewed from Parliament Hill, from the Supreme Court Terrace, from the Chaudière, from Kaweki Point and the Rideau Canal locks, from the History Museum, Jacques Cartier Park, Lady Grey Drive, which the NCC is very interested in rehabilitating, the Chateau Laurier Terrace, and up and down river. In fact, there is probably no other Ottawa landmark that can be viewed from so many directions and which in turn gives reverse views back to all those places that I've mentioned. Just another personal note, for 8 years, I used that bridge every week when I was in school to go skiing at Camp Fortune, because there was no McDonald-Cartier Bridge, there was no Portage Bridge. It was the only way, if you lived in the east end of town, to get to the Gatineau Park. The decision to demolish, as you've heard from PSPC, is really based on meeting highway standards. We've also heard that argument applied to the old railway bridge at Herdman across the Rideau River, which is an active transportation route that you've been told has to be replaced because it doesn't meet highway standards. Well, I think it's very important, as Leslie Maitland has said, that we do see very clearly what can be done if the bridge is maintained for active transportation only, including a tramway, which has a much lighter touch than standard heavy road traffic. So just to finish up, and I see I'm out of time, the historical context is really important with respect to the history of the local railways, the Transcontinental Railway, and Dominion Bridge, as well as the transportation links between Ottawa and Gatineau. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your delegation. I don't see any questions, but I actually did want to thank you for the work that you've undertaken around historical commemoration, as well as the preservation of our history, especially concerning our railroads. You might not know this, but I'm the son of a railroader, so I'm always excited when I see somebody who's talking about the preservation of this history. And you did answer some of the questions around reflections around rail history for the current bridge. So I thank you so much for your work and for your delegation. The next registered speaker is John Zavongar.
This is Vonar.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And apologies.
No worries. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. I'm a landscape architect here and long interest in heritage and in working in heritage conservation. I'm going to give a summary of a presentation I gave on the request of Heritage Ottawa 2.5 years ago in regards to the importance of communities and their connection to bridges, both around the world and locally. When I arrived here in the mid-1980s, one of the first photographs I took of the Alexandra Bridge was from Ottawa Locks. And like thousands of other visitors before and after, was smitten with this iconic structure. My practicum study of Majors Hill Park many years ago established for me a historical and contextual baseline that naturally included the bridge. Historically and metaphorically, bridges have long served as indelible icons and have been embedded in our collective subconscious. Numerous examples spring to mind: the Tower Bridge in London, Forth Bridge in Scotland, or closer to home, the Brooklyn Bridge or the Golden Gate Bridge. And inasmuch as they are appreciated, when these engineering works are exposed to any number of threats, communities rally to either save them or to reconstitute them. The tradition of this enthusiastic outpouring towards protecting cherished engineering heritage can be found in many examples around the globe, including the Chapel Bridge in Lucerne, Switzerland, that succumbed to fire, the Stary Bridge or Mostar Bridge in Bosnia-Herzegovina that was bombed many years ago and rebuilt, and the Bennerley Viaduct in the UK. On this side of the Atlantic, a number of recent examples serve as suitable case studies of threatened or damaged bridges supported and saved by a variety of communities. For example, the Kinsale Trestle Bridge on Vancouver Island, the Kettle Valley Railway Bridge in Kelowna, BC, and the Blue Bridge in Victoria, BC. And there's also a bridge in Saskatoon that was recently rehabilitated. Locally, in the late 1980s, a local group advocated on behalf of the Bank Street Bridge. By the 1970s, the 1912 bridge was in disrepair and trucks had been banned from using it. While debate ensued about whether to replace or to restore it with a nondescript highway bridge, Passionate locals advocated for its retention and repair, especially its character-defining arches. Ultimately, the decision was made to restore the structure and the work completed in 1993 on time and under budget. As for other bridges in the broader NCA, it's worth mentioning that those that have been recently retained and in some instances repurposed include the Chief William Commanda Bridge, the Chaudière Crossing, and the Laurier Avenue Bridge. All of them have their own particular stories and are still appreciated. I've always loved that photograph of the Alexandra Bridge under construction at the turn of the 20th century. Of course, since the mid-1960s, thanks to the planning of Jacques Rébert and the shift of all rail traffic away from the downtown core, the bridge was reimagined and repurposed to the vocation that we appreciate and enjoy today. And the stroll across the bridge from Gatineau to Ottawa, with its breathtaking views of the hill and Ottawa River environs, remains my favorite in the NCA. But what remains missing in this discussion appears to be a broader understanding of what is valued through the stretch of the Ottawa River, from upstream of the Chaudière Crossing down to and past the Macdonald-Cartier Bridge, although we may have heard this morning that there is some work to that end taking place. A most amazing exercise has been undertaken under the tripartite leadership of the City of Ottawa, Parks Canada, and the NCC, a cultural landscape study of the Ottawa Reach of the Rideau Canal. The goal of this proactive study is to provide guidance in regards to proposed interventions from Ottawa Locks southwards to Mooney's Bay. The study explores multiple character areas in regards to their respective heritage values and character-defining elements. Clear, precise, and action-oriented conservation and management guidelines are intended to inform their respective duties to review land use planning projects and to develop internal programs and projects related to the Ottawa Reach. It might be something to consider here. Many salient points have been made about the historical and engineering importance of this node and bridge in the core, whether through the lenses of World Heritage, national significance, or engineering import. And as it was the best and brightest who conceived and built this bridge, we must allow the best and brightest of today to maintain it for the benefit of the capital and for future generations. So in spite of the pressure and continued threat, there is but one thing left to say. The Alexandra Bridge, this bridge, and our bridge is still there and valued by this community. Let's keep it that way. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your delegation. And you do have a question from Vice Chair Plante.
Yes, thank you so much. I think I'm just going to crown you our bridge nerd with your mention of all the different bridges everywhere. I actually just went on Amazon to see if there was a books of different bridges around the world, and now you've really piqued my curiosity. You mentioned the Gribert report, which has a lot of historical significance in my ward specifically. I was wondering if you are aware why there was a lot of attention paid to specifically this bridge and not a lot of conversation around doing something about the truck route that leads to Gatineau, like on that bridge specifically. Like, why has the attention, I honestly don't know, I'm posing the question, why we are having this large discussion about large sums of money when there's a sort of equity issue not far down the street with King Edward.
I'm not as familiar with that. Maybe David Jeans would be one to weigh in on that, but I've often said or spoken to others about the fact that a lot of the pressure that that seem to be experienced with truck traffic could be alleviated with a further bridge east of the Macdonald-Cartier Bridge. So,
yeah, no, and that's kind of sort of the big question mark I have hanging over my head on all this is, why is this discussion happening either not in parallel or alongside with finding solutions to, I mean, there was a lot of references made to Algonquin, and that's wonderful. It's just there was no equity lens applied, it seems, and correct me if I'm wrong, to the decision here.
It's a good question. I can't answer it.
Could maybe the presenters tackle it, Chair? I'm not sure if I'm allowed
and
to
so,
do that.
Vice Chair, we will have an opportunity to ask questions of the presenters. So that would be the opportunity to ask that question.
Always great with the procedure stuff. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for your delegation. Much appreciated. Our last delegate is Marceline Chermont. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And you have 5 minutes.
Nous recevoir au nom de la Société d'histoire de l'Outaouais. Je suis Marcelin Chaumont. Nous intervenons aujourd'hui pour la Société d'histoire en lien avec la présentation qui vient d'être faite par la CCN. Ils vous ont fait part d'un soi-disant processus de consultation pour les options de remplacement du pont Alexandra qu'elle mènera à l'automne pour le compte de travaux publics. En premier lieu, du côté de Gatineau, nous ne sommes pas satisfaits et nous n'avons pas l'impression que nous avons participé à quelques consultations que ce soit qui fait en sorte qu'on pense que le processus a été mal amorcé. Nous vous rappelons d'abord que le projet de démolir et remplacer le pont entamé par travaux publics n'a fait lui-même d'aucune consultation auprès du public réellement, des instances gouvernementales, municipales ou provinciales. Le pont Alexandra est pourtant désigné, et ça nous interpelle beaucoup, site historique national de génie civil depuis 1995 par la Société canadienne de génie civil. Le gouvernement fédéral a accordé lui-même à ce monument remarquable la cote patrimoniale d'importance historique nationale en 2011. Et ça, on est en plein centre de la capitale nationale du Canada, à Ottawa. Le projet de nouveau lien autoroutier proposé par Travaux publics pour remplacer le pont est incohérent avec les objectifs même du gouvernement fédéral en développement durable. Nous, on s'entend là-dessus. Le projet a été justifié à la hâte sans égard à l'importance patrimoniale du pont sur la base d'arguments économiques que nous questionnons beaucoup. Aucune évaluation de l'option de réhabiliter le pont pour l'usage exclusif du transport actif ou collectif n'a été menée, un usage qui réduirait les coûts d'entretien. Des études pourtant promises sur la valeur patrimoniale du pont Alexandra n'ont toujours pas été abouties. Toutes ces études auraient dû être faites avant de décider de la démolition. Donc, on a un peu commencé le processus inverse. Vous comprenez que nous appuyons fortement les intervenants qui nous ont précédés. Nous vous invitons donc comme comité à poser un regard critique sur le contenu de la présentation de la CCN et de travaux publics, comme le conseil municipal de Gatineau l'a fait il y a plus d'une semaine en demandant à la CCN de refaire ses devoirs en exigeant de favoriser la réhabilitation du pont patrimonial et identitaire. Merci beaucoup de votre attention.
Merci. Vice Chair Plante.
Oui, merci beaucoup pour ton intervention, pour ta délégation, excuse-moi. Pourriez-vous juste aborder un peu qu'est-ce que vous avez mentionné à la fin de qu'est-ce qui est arrivé au Conseil de Gatineau la semaine passée? J'avais entendu un peu la même chose, que le Conseil à Gatineau veut réhabiliser, excuse-moi, le pont plutôt que le remplacer. Pourriez-vous juste aborder ça un peu?
Oui, nous avons assisté à cette présentation-là. Tout à fait, c'est que 95% des interventions faites par les conseillers municipaux de la ville de Gatineau questionnaient la démarche qui avait été entreprise par la CCN en termes de consultation, de décision hâtive, de dire c'est la démolition ou rien. Donc, toutes ces interventions-là ont tourné dans ce sens-là. Et à la fin, on a demandé à la CCN de revoir la possibilité de sauver le pont, de ne pas le démolir et de le garder pour du transport actif. Il va sans dire.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Merci. And so that concludes our registered speakers. Now questions for the presenters from the Government of Canada. And I see that Vice Chair Plante has raised her hand.
I think I'm the only one, but that's OK. Merci beaucoup pour la présentation. C'était super intéressant. Je pense pas qu'on s'est croisés auparavant. Alors, je suis toujours ouverte de faire une rencontre ou qu'on se parle dans les prochaines semaines aussi. J'avais juste quelques questions et j'aimerais aussi, juste premièrement, j'avais posé la question au sujet de King Edward et s'il y avait comme une lentille d'équité qui avait été portée sur ce dossier. Est-ce que ça a été fait ou non?
Peux-tu, Stéphanie, s'il vous plaît, répéter la question? C'est à propos de les analyses qui ont été faites jusqu'à date pour...
Oui, vous avez mentionné la participation des peuples autochtones, que vous avez vraiment fait de la recherche sur l'historique du point de vue algonquin, qui est magnifique, by the way. C'est vraiment bien que vous avez fait ces recherches-là, mais je voulais savoir s'il y avait une recherche qui a été faite au sujet de l'équité. S'il y a des communautés vulnérables dans les quartiers, par exemple, ou si on devrait aussi mettre de l'emphase ou de l'argent pour focuser sur des problèmes dans d'autres quartiers vulnérables qui ont des ponts aux alentours.
C'est certain qu'il y a des communautés vulnérables de chaque côté du pont, puis c'est des communautés qui seraient impactées par le projet de remplacement. Donc, pendant que le pont est remplacé, il n'y aurait pas un lien pour que les gens puissent traverser la rivière. Mais de voir les impacts, puis comment on peut améliorer la condition de ces communautés-là, c'est pas nécessairement fait à travers du projet. C'est certain qu'on va regarder comment on peut mitiger les impacts, comment on peut aider les gens à traverser la rivière, mais nous autres, on regarde les impacts du projet, puis on va essayer de mitiger ça. Je ne sais pas si j'ai bien répondu à la question.
No, sorry, I'll pose it in English because maybe I didn't phrase it properly. Was there an equity lens applied to any of the discussion, research, decision-making around replacing this bridge in particular and the impacts of neighboring communities, specifically looking at other bridges we have? I'm speaking specifically around the King Edward area, because I'm very curious to know why there's a lot of emphasis being placed on replacing this bridge and not looking at where monies could be spent on serving low-income communities impacted by bridges in other areas.
So the decision is based on health and safety. That was the driver for the project. And that was the decision plus the studies that led us to the replacement project. I'm sorry, I'm just struggling with the context of the question. I don't know if somebody around the table can provide additional information.
I would add to that, et je vous dirais, conseillère Plante, qu'au niveau de la consultation de l'engagement pour ce projet-ci, suite à la décision du gouvernement du Canada et pour le projet de SPAC, ce qu'on a voulu faire, c'est de faire une analyse d'ACS+, un GBA Plus Analysis, qui nous a permis d'identifier toutes justement les communautés qui sont soit sous-représentées ou bien qui ont besoin d'avoir justement cet engagement-là additionnel. Et on a fait beaucoup de recherches et d'engagement auprès de ces communautés-là pour vraiment savoir ce serait quoi les impacts de ce projet-ci en particulier. Je crois que votre question aussi, c'est pour l'ensemble des projets et des transports dans la région et des interconnexions. Justement, il y a le plan intégré des traverses qui a étudié la chose et donc je voudrais que c'est un des éléments qui a contribué, qui nous contribue aux décisions par rapport au transport, mais pour ce projet-ci, on consulte des communautés sous-représentées tout à fait dans le cadre des consultations et de l'engagement public.
Mais essentiellement, ma question est, vous n'avez pas consulté d'autres communautés vulnérables aux alentours des autres traverses dans la capitale nationale, juste celle-ci?
L'engagement se fait pour cette traversée, oui.
OK, merci. All right. There was a mention about sort of additional closures in the context of keeping this bridge, whether it's kept pedestrianized, whether it's done completely to accept cars. Can you confirm if a new bridge will be pedestrian only, or will it be open for like car traffic?
So the new bridge is meant to increase active mobility. So we're looking at wider, pedestrian walkways, wider and safer cycling facilities. But we are also constructing 2 traffic lanes on the east side of the bridge for vehicles and public transit. And as I mentioned, those the lanes and the bridge will be designed to welcome a tram, should a tram be required or put on the bridge in the future.
Okay, fair enough. I was just reading an article, I believe yesterday, on the 3rd Avenue Bridge in New York, and how climate change has expanded the steel, and they're having problems putting the bridge up and down because it's made of a certain specific steel and climate change is affecting it. The corrosion pictures that you showed earlier, is that a result of snow and salting, or is that a result of other environmental factors?
So there are multiple things that affect corrosion. One of them, and probably the leading cause, is the icing salts. So what you saw in the pictures were mainly a direct a result of de-icing the bridge over winter.
Okay, very Ottawa problem, I guess. Okay, okay, j'ai pas d'autres questions. Merci beaucoup, mais je voulais juste réitérer que ça me concerne énormément, qu'on met beaucoup d'efforts, d'attention, d'argent sur des études pour remplacer un pont. Et je comprends qu'il y a des problèmes avec le pont lui-même, il est vieux. Il y a de la rouille, etc. Mais on ne parle pas du tout de l'effet de la circulation des poids lourds au centre-ville. Je trouve que c'est vraiment malheureux, puis on a vraiment manqué une opportunité ici de vraiment faire des avances au niveau de la transportation ici dans la capitale nationale, au côté Ottawa et côté Gatineau aussi. Merci beaucoup.
Missy, thank you so much. Our next person with their hand raised is Member Madigan.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to also say I'm a son of a train engineer from Newfoundland, but unfortunately, most of the railway heritage here has been pulled up and sent off to recycling. Thank you for your presentation. It's directed towards the panel here. I think we've heard from the community that there's a desire for the community to retain the bridge and rehabilitate it, which might require more investment than just a new bridge. I always think that we should support that part of the community if possible, since there's a strong desire to keep the bridge. And if you look at Quebec City, I'm assuming that one of the reasons why the Quebec City Bridge was retained was because the community had a strong feeling for the bridge, even though perhaps that bridge was equally suffering from deterioration. 2 questions. What's the difference between the bridge here in Ottawa and the bridge in Quebec City when considered they're almost the same age, same type of structure, same use? What made the change in the decision to retain one bridge and rehabilitate it versus replace this bridge, possibly with a new feature bridge? That's the first question. Second question. Actually, respond to the first question.
Do you want to, we can do sort of one at a time if
I think it'd be best.
Okay. So, I mean, I think, it's a great opportunity just to sort of, I think recap some of the comments and concerns that we have or that we heard. I mean, I think from a certain perspective, they are shared concerns. That's why we're here today. The importance of Alexandra, the heritage, the history of the bridge. I mean, those are important considerations as we move forward. The reality is that we are facing engineering and technical challenges that simply preclude our ability to repair the existing structure. That's both something that speaks to the superstructures, or the elements on top of the deck, and the substructure itself as well, including the piers, some of the concrete platforms. Some of the concerns here, cannot be simply mitigated by closing a bridge to vehicular traffic. We get into a little bit of a technical discussion around the difference between live loads of a bridge and dead loads of a bridge. Dead loads where there's no transportation or vehicle traffic or any sort of are significant, and there is work that needs to be done to address the significant corrosion that once these types of issues set in, it's very difficult to remediate even in the best of situations. So, Paul's here to speak more about the technical aspects of things and why, unfortunately, it's not a decision as to, do we repair or replace. The reality is we have no choice but to advance the replacement of the structure. But it's also an opportunity for us to really appreciate the history, the importance, the significance, the iconic presence of this historical bridge as part of our future functional program. So that's where, we do see a structure at the end of the day that really drives a lot of the benefits that, we're hearing today in terms of a crossing that is equitable, that serves a number of different purposes, that is suited to, our climate, that meets current highway and engineering and bridge codes. So I just wanted to preface that with, in terms of, question one, as it relates specifically to, comparison of, Quebec Bridge and the Alexandra Bridge. There are some nuances there in terms of obviously the use, how the bridge has potentially been maintained. Maybe I'll let Paul answer that in a little bit more detail, but I think the point being is that, no two structures are the same. So, we've heard a couple examples of where there have been successful outcomes with respect to the ability to maintain, structures that are 100+ years old. There are also a number of examples where the reality is that bridges, when they achieve, the end of their useful life or their service life, reality is that they need to be replaced. And there's been a number of recent examples of that. Champlain in Montreal is a good one. But I think the point there is that there's no necessarily one size fits all. There are case-by-case considerations that merit a specific engineering assessment and a way forward in terms of specific strategy with respect to the bridge. But Paul, maybe I'll let you sort of speak a little bit more in terms of the particularities of Quebec versus Alexandra.
Sure. So we don't have the reports from the Quebec Bridge, so I don't have a structural evaluation or condition report to assess the bridge. They are similar in nature, similar type bridges. However, like Stefan just mentioned, you can't compare two bridges. It depends how they were used, if they were exposed to chlorides, if they were protected against chloride, coating history, maintenance history, structural detailing, structural system itself, and the materials themselves, right? So some bridges will develop a natural protection against corrosion, so the steel will rust, but that then creates protection for the steel behind it. I think that could be happening on the Quebec Bridge. When I look at pictures, that kind of looks like what's going on. On Alexandra, it's not happening. What happens on the bridge, steel corrodes, it flakes off, next layer, corrodes and peels off. So it's basically the corrosion is eating through the steel. What we've done, in the recent decades is complete the easier stuff. So we've been cutting out pieces and replacing them. So we can get to the steel that's corroded if it's easily accessible. What we're looking at now is the work that's very complex, and it's the corrosion has set in between the members, and we can't get to that, and it's eating away at the steel. It's pushing the steel members apart. It's bending members. It's adding stress in the members. It's also creating bending in some of the members. So we don't know if that's happening on the Quebec Bridge, but it is happening on the Alexandra Bridge. So the complex work that would need to get done to keep this bridge, for whether it's active transportation or tram or vehicles, is basically we would have to start replacing all these members. So it won't be a repair project, it'll be a replacement project. We'll be replacing it in kind. And to do that, you either shore from the riverbed up to support the structure, you either build some sort of bridge structure around it to support it, or you take it apart, bring it to shore and work on it. So what I'm trying to say is we can't repair these sections. We have to replacement. It would be some sort of replica of the existing bridge, but it won't be the same thing. The member sizes will have to change. So we're at the end of it. And we also need to consider public safety in this. So we could delay the replacement a little, but things are going on the bridge. Even today, while there's no traffic, we've discovered 2 cracked confinement nuts on the bridge. These nuts have no loading from traffic. They're there to keep things together. They've cracked because the corrosion between the members is pushing them apart. So it's at a point where the decision was made to replace the bridge. It was the right decision. We're doing work on the bridge now to keep it active and keep it safe until we replace it. But we're at the point where it needs to be replaced.
Great, thank you. I appreciate those aspects, but we deal with that, with buildings all the time, buildings, and to replace parts and keep them moving. Oftentimes, by definition, something is called at the end of its life cycle, but it might be still good, it might not, it might just need more intervention, more money to put into it. And the point's well taken that at some point it costs too much money and then you replace it, but you replace it in kind or replace it with something new. And then that's another decision point. My second question is in the heritage community these days, and also sustainable communities, there's this aspect of embodied energy in the materials. And I understood the federal government was committed to doing what's called life cycle analysis for embodied energy, which is a different study from the LCA that you mentioned, which I understood from browsing background documents. The LCA you mentioned was the life cycle costing analysis, abbreviated to LCA. But I did not see any LCA for embodied energy done on the bridge. Why was that?
So the analysis in 2018 was based on cost, based on the condition of the structure. There was no embodied carbon assessed at that time. We've done that post replacement decision through the Tetra Tech report. So it looked at, again, if we try to keep this bridge 75 years versus a replacement, basically came to the same conclusion, or the conclusion is that it's pretty much equal. We're doing, obviously, through the replacement project, a GHG study to determine how much GHG would be produced. So as part of the decision towards one final bridge concept, we're going to look at the impact of the various concepts. So that'll be an input into the decision process.
So you're saying life cycle analysis was done on as part of the latter report, the more recent report? For embodied energy carbon, that was done as part of the later report you mentioned?
Correct, yes.
Okay. It was just an understanding oftentimes when, as I understand LCAs, oftentimes you look at a building and from a life cycle costing for a project, you might say, yes, just tear the building down and replace it. But oftentimes when you look at a building for embodied energy, then it turns that it would be worth retaining. And usually it's based largely on structure, and a bridge is largely structure. So one of the things that would be part of the decision point, maybe to reconsider total replacement to perhaps dismantling, replacing parts and putting it back together again. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those questions. I believe that Member Quinn has her hand raised as well.
Thank you, Chair King. Thank you for your presentation. I'd just like to pick up on a couple of things that have already been mentioned. First of all, my colleague, Mr. Madigan, and my own experience of participating in public surveys, et cetera, as part of the public consultation process. in that experience, I found that the replacement was always the starting point, and my opinion was sought on how I thought commemorating the Alexandra Bridge should take place. It was never an opportunity to support the retention, possibly as James has said, and you yourselves have just said, that would include replacing parts of the bridge, and which happens regularly when you with life cycle aspects of structures have to be replaced. This should not mean that it negates the value of the existing bridge and its retention. And similarly, the last presenter raised the point that the city of Gatineau has asked the NCC to go back and look at presenting the possible retention and use for active transportation only as one of the potential solutions to the current the current health of the bridge. One of the things for me that's been missing in all of this discussion is the context of how we are trying to remove traffic from the downtown. I mean, this committee has been asked to comment on studies and recommendations on how the city can meet its objectives of reducing vehicular traffic in Lower Town and the Byward Market. And the access of the Alexandra Bridge just feeds vehicular traffic straight into those areas. So, and that is 10% of the vehicular traffic crossing interprovincially on our 5 bridges. So, have you made any recommendations or looked at how you would reconcile those two seemingly objectives that are seemingly at odds with each other? And then again, as others have asked, looking at retaining the bridge for active transportation use only, and focusing on the very glaring need for the 6th bridge that needs to handle truck traffic, which our downtown cannot handle. And we've known this for decades. It's like the elephant in the room here. We need to talk about it. And this signature bridge is going to cost a lot of money. And there's absolutely no mention of the need to handle for a bridge that can handle a lot more than 10% of the traffic that is needed for interprovincial crossing, and one that can handle heavy trucks. So I guess, have you in fact looked at that, and you're just, you didn't think that perhaps it was necessary to talk about it today, but I'd love to hear if that has been part of your analysis and what conclusions you've come to. Thank you.
So thank you, Member Quinn. I think there was a number of subcomponents to that question. So I'm going to try and tackle them all. So today's presentation really focused on the Alexandra Bridge replacement. There is some parallel analysis that's occurring with respect to additional crossing, but we're not in a position to discuss that today. As it relates to the removal of vehicular traffic from Alexandra, I think maybe there's 2 components to that. One is and we spoke to sort of some of the technical and the engineering constraints with respect to the existing structure earlier, but the reality is that doesn't mitigate sort of call it the structural concerns of the bridge itself. There is still a significant dead load of the structure that's sitting on the substructure that requires a solution. So from that perspective, that's where you made reference to the fact that a lot of these public consultations we're talking about the replacements as a starting point. From our perspective, and hopefully the materials and the discussion today have been helpful on that, the repair is just not a feasible technical or engineering solution. Again, we're happy to maybe, carve out some time to get into a much more detailed technical discussion as to the state of the superstructure and the substructure. But simply, removing vehicular traffic from that crossing does not mitigate the concerns or the technical condition of the bridge. On that traffic piece, though, the reality is this bridge accommodates 10% of interprovincial traffic. Simply closing, closing this crossing to vehicular traffic, that 10% of traffic needs to be diverted elsewhere. And this is where it's important to understand that, the bridges that are jointly managed by both PSPC and NCC form a network infrastructure within the cities of Gatineau and Ottawa. So this is where it's important that that traffic volume still be addressed, that there is a solution there. And this is why it's so important as we develop the functional program for the replacement bridge that we're able to address all of these concerns and also plan for growth in the future. We are anticipating some significant growth within the national capital area. We fully expect, there were some comments with respect to active transportation. All modalities of transportation will increase and with that accompanied growth. So from our perspective, I think what's important is really making sure that we have a replacement bridge that at the end of the day really drives it addresses the needs of both communities in such a way that supports growth in the future. On the consultation piece, I don't know if you want to pass it over to either Jordan or the NCC, because I think there were a couple comments, Member Quinn, that you had with respect to consultation, maybe the process there, but may I let my colleagues speak to that?
Thank you very much, Stefan and Member Quinn. So when we began the consultation process, what we did focus on as part of our engagement to better understand what the community values were to contribute to the design principles, as well as better understanding what the potential benefits could be of the replacement, as well as what the impacts would be during that construction period and what other mitigation measures could be implemented. So these are all of the factors that then contributed to the impact assessment process and also contribute to the design process. So we're working very closely with the communities throughout. You're absolutely right that we did start at that point due to PSPC and the Government of Canada's decision.
I have no follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't see other hands raised. I just did have one last question that just concerned the expected timeline for the completion of the heritage impact analysis and its circulation. So I was just wondering if you could outline when you're expecting that to be completed and circulated.
So the framework that the heritage impact assessment will largely comprise with a heritage conservation approach, that is going to be complete by the end of the summer or September timeframe. And in the meantime, there will also be an analysis of bridge options that will against this conservation approach, and that will be part of a concept design report that I believe is issued around the same time.
I would add that it was circulated to staff at the city, and it was also presented to the public advisory group at the 33% mark, the 66% mark, and we will be sharing the 90% from my understanding.
Okay, thank you so much. We look forward to that being shared publicly. We appreciate that you are working with stakeholders, including the City of Ottawa, our transportation planners, our heritage planners, as well as, we appreciate the fact that in terms of your own consultation process, where you've engaged with the Indigenous community, had wider public consultations, have created a public advisory group. We appreciate within the scope of all of the public consultation that you're undertaking, that you are willing to participate in this discussion today and hear directly both from committee and council members, as well as the public as to their concerns. So we are very appreciative that you participated in this process. And of course, I know that there will be an ongoing dialogue both at the bureaucratic level of the city with the multiple planning elements, as well as with elected officials and others in the community. So we thank you so much for your presentation. It was much appreciated. And our next item will be an application to alter 259 Clemo Avenue. And we'll just wait for the transition so that staff can provide a presentation on that item.
Good morning. It's just barely still morning. Committee. So I'll give the presentation for 259 Clemo Avenue. Just waiting for the English slides. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. All right. Next slide, please. The property at 259 Clemo Avenue is designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act as part of the Clemo-Monkland Driveway and Linden Terrace Heritage Conservation District. The subject property is on the north side of Clemo Avenue between Percy and Lyon Streets. The property contains a 2.5-story Tudor Revival house constructed in 1913. The building features a 3-sided bay window, a large porch, and red brick cladding on the first floor with half timbering on the second floor. The property is considered to be a contributing property within the Clemo-Monkland Driveway and Linden Terrace HCD. Next slide, please. The heritage permit application is for the construction of a 2-story addition in the side and rear yard and the construction of a new detached garage with green roof in the rear. I've highlighted those items on blue on the screen. Next slide, please. Here's existing building on the left in the image, and then on the right-hand side is the proposed alterations and addition on, also highlighted in blue. The design of the addition is contemporary with large windows, a flat roof, and vertical and horizontal wood cladding. The existing house will be conserved and elements restored, such as installing cedar shakes on the roof. Next slide. Here's additions from the side, which is the west elevation. The addition is set back slightly from the front wall of the house. Next slide again. And this is the rear, showing the addition again highlighted in blue on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. The proposal has been evaluated against the guidelines in the Clemo Monklin driveway and Linden Terrace Hares Conservation District. The staff have determined that the proposal is consistent with the plan for the following reasons. The height of the addition is lower than the height of the roof of the existing building, as it will be just above the eaves line. Further, a recessed glazed link, referred to as a gasket, is even lower than the eaves line, thereby creating more separation in location, height, and setback from the Tudor Revival House. The location of the addition is in the rear and side yard. The HCD plan has a guideline regarding the placement of additions and that they should be typically in the rear. However, when a side yard addition is proposed, it should be set back from the front wall. The addition is set back from the front wall. However, it is staff's opinion that it should be pushed back further in order to ensure subordination and better understand the three-dimensional volume of the existing house. A condition to set back the addition further from the front wall is recommended as part of this application. The design of the addition is contemporary in nature, however, takes design cues from the house in terms of datum lines and proportions. The HCD plan allows for a variety of design styles on additions, provided that it complements and respects the cultural heritage value of the district. Next slide, please. The material used on the addition will be primarily wood with some bronze cladding used as an accent. While used in a contemporary manner in the design, the use of wood is appropriate in the district and subordinate to the brick of the house. The primary treatment of the heritage structure is restoration. The roof cladding will be replaced with cedar shakes, and the porch will be retained with some elements proposed to be replaced with metal. The windows on the existing house are not original and will be replaced with new windows. However, not all the windows are currently proposed to have divisions. A second condition has been recommended by staff to ensure that the materials and details on the porch meet the HCD plan, as well as that all windows have appropriate divisions on the historic house. And finally, the landscape plan features a front yard garden, simple limestone walkway, and planting of 2 new trees. A new permeable driveway will be installed and a green roof will be planted on the detached garage, enhancing the greenery on the property. Next slide. Just to go over the conditions quickly. So as mentioned, we're recommending conditions be in place to better meet the policies and guidelines in the HCD plan. The first one here is related to the setback of the addition. So in order to ensure the prominence and three-dimensional readability of the Tudor Revival House, staff recommend that the applicant set back the addition to be in line with the gasket at 1.4 meters from the front wall of the house. While side yard additions are permitted in the HCD, they should be set back from the front wall to ensure the heritage resource retains primacy in the lot. Next slide. To improve the conservation approach on the house, staff also recommend that all the windows on the existing building contain the appropriate muntin bars. Further, approach on the porch should be improved by the use of wood on the baluster instead of metal and refining the details of the skirting. These recommendations are echoed in the heritage impact assessment submitted as part of the application. Next slide. In terms of consultation, the Glebe Community Association and Heritage Ottawa were notified, as was the ward councillor and the neighbors. The next slide. And finally, staff recommend to approve the application for the alteration subject to the conditions just outlined and issue the permit for a 2-year expiry date. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We did receive correspondence from Heritage Ottawa as well as for residents. We do have a number of registered speakers, including the applicant team. So I don't know if they want to speak. We also have Heritage Ottawa also registered, as well as Robert Player registered. So I didn't know if the applicant team is with us and wanted to comment. Okay, okay. And Heritage Ottawa, if required, I don't know if Linda Hogue is still with us. Oh. Okay. And then we do have Robert Player as well registered. Yes, please, if you want to delegate, please go ahead. Thank you. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you so much for having me. I got the letter about this heritage renovation on Friday afternoon, and I almost didn't open it. I happen to be the owner of the house right next door at 255 Clemo Avenue. So I was quite shocked when I got it and opened it up. And I had a hard time getting the details from the internet, so I had to go through the local counselor to get the correct details and all of the information. And also the very, very short time made it almost impossible for me to consult with any heritage architect on the matter because it was on the weekend. Anyway, I've only got 5 minutes, so I'm not going to talk about the part of the renovation that deals with heritage. I am going to say something because on the back of the house, there is an extension that runs right up to the lot line practically. And what it does is it blocks the sun from 4 rooms in 255 Clemo Avenue completely. The afternoon sun, we don't get any sun in there at all. And there should have been a shadow analysis done. I understand it's not necessary, but it obviously wasn't done. And the other thing is that if there was a high-rise building, a 12-story building built where this is being proposed, the actual sheltering from the sun would be exactly the same as this particular structure gives. Anyway, on the question of heritage, I have had a lot of experience dealing with builders and architects over the years. And from being the project manager, project engineer for Habitat 67 in Montreal during the World's Fair, working under Moishe Safdie, and also being 8 years as the Commissioner of Housing and Property for the City of Ottawa. And during that period of time, we built over 3,000 housing units, as well as fire stations and rec centers, all of which required meetings with builders and meetings with community and a lot of time to really assess a particular project before it was approved. And I just don't see that happening here. And with the background I've had, I find that this proposed renovation is totally inappropriate on a street that is supposed to be deemed a heritage zone. Those are my comments.
Thank you so much for your delegation. I don't see any hands raised for questions, so thank you so much. I just wanted to check to see if Heritage Ottawa wanted to comment on this item. Okay, thank you. We do have the written submission from Heritage Ottawa on record. So thank you so much for your delegation.
I submitted a written submission as well with drawings and how this actually affects the sun and the views from 4 of our rooms in 255 Clemo.
Thank you so much, and I know that the committee is in receipt. Thank you. So at this time, are there any questions to staff? Seeing none, is the report carried? Oh, sorry. Sorry, I didn't see you raise your hand. Member Madigan.
Thank you, Chair. Looking through the report, I see a number of different points, windows, handrails, materials. Might be rambling a little bit. Is there an obligation to conserve the house and bring it back to its original appearance and materiality? Is that part of the requirements?
There is no requirement to restore the house. However, staff strongly support and the plan speaks to encouraging restoration. And through this application, we were highly recommending, especially since so much of it's intact today.
Right. It's just that when I look at the renderings, like there's the intent to change the windows from so double hung to casements, which seems to be counter to what was there originally, but maybe it was casements.
The plan doesn't speak specifically to the operating mechanism of the windows, only the division pattern. So there's no requirement for them to continue as sash windows rather than casements, the reverse rather.
Going to a broader sort of question, Clemo seems very integral. A lot of houses still remain as they were, it seems, and new additions seem to be in a similar sort of style with hip roofs or these sort of things. Was any consideration given that the very contemporary addition is detracting sort of from the overall integrity of the street as well as the house itself?
The HCD plan allows for a variety of design and architectural expressions through additions or new construction. It does have to be subordinate and compatible to the district and the existing property. However, a variety of styles are permitted.
Okay, last point. There's a lot of wood on the addition. Like overall, like if standalone, I'll say like as a project, if you're doing a very contemporary addition to a heritage house, there seems to be a nice balance there with analysis of proportions. But for the district, it seems to pull away from the spirit of the district. One being materiality, where a lot of houses are either brick, stucco, or minimal wood, where the addition has a lot of wood, for example.
Similar to the policies about design and architectural expression, a variety of materials are permitted, and one being wood, stucco, brick. So it's up to the architect and their applicant team to decide sort of what they're like to do. And as long as it meets the plan in terms of those materials being the dominant materials on the addition, that can be acceptable.
Okay, oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. Member Quinn. Member Quinn, I don't think you're unmuted.
Three times lucky. Okay. 3 clicks later. Okay. Sorry. My question is pertains to the front porch. Obviously the retention. Clearly, it's an extremely important element, and just the metal, the new metal element. You had mentioned that you are recommending that be changed to wood. Could you just go over that again for me, please?
Yeah, as you've noted, the proposal includes a metal railing, and today the existing is a wood baluster, and staff feel that wood is important, an attribute for that building, the style and the character of the district, and do want to see something very similar to what's there today reinstated. So I've included a condition with the permit application to have wood as the main prominent material of the baluster.
Okay, thank you. I just clarification there. And just to also follow up on the point of my colleague, Mr. Madigan, about the impact to the integrity of the streetscape, the Heritage Conservation District streetscape. I guess the question, I understand and appreciate that a variety of architectural styles, etc., but at the end of the day, the compatibility to the streetscape, I agree in and of itself, it's not an unattractive structure, but it leaves to me something to be desired in terms of its complementarity to the street. So those are my comments, but I support this with the city staff's recommendations, I think being very key to the design, to the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I see that Councillor Leeper has his hand raised.
Thank you. I'm going to support this one. The architecture might not be to everyone's taste, and then it might be to many people's taste. It's obviously fairly subjective. The regulations with respect to
or the guidelines with respect to where a side yard addition should be, speak to moving the structure back in order to maintain, I assume, its subordination to the main structure, the principal structure. In this case, staff are going to be requiring that it be set back 1.4 meters, which is 4 feet or roughly. How do you arrive at 4 feet setback is enough to maintain subordination where 3 feet wouldn't?
We often look for a point on the existing building. In this case, the chimney provided that for us. One of the first iterations of this application was forward of the chimney towards the front wall of the house, and we were asking them to push back the addition to be closer to the chimney mark, and then that with the gasket. And then in order to really speak to that three-dimensional volume of the existing building, we feel that it's important just to maintain that 1.4 meter through across the entire front facade of the addition rather than just a small portion of that gasket.
So in the case of the principal structures, that chimney's not halfway the depth of the structure then?
No, it's 1.4 meters.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all the questions and comments. Is report carried?
Carried.
Carried. Thank you. So this report will be submitted to City Council tomorrow on July 10th for consideration. Our next item is an application to alter Aberdine Pavilion, and we will have a presentation from staff.
Mr. Chair, just before everybody begins, I just wanted to say that we're going to have a bit of a hybrid. We have Anne Fitzpatrick is on the screen, and then the rest of the team is here with us in person. So they will do everything, and I hope to say nothing.
Thank you. Appreciate the heads up.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Leslie, for the introduction. So this presentation is for the application to alter the Aberdeen Pavilion. Like Leslie mentioned, it's a hybrid presentation, and it's also going to be a joint presentation today. I'm the heritage planner who's been working on the file, and also here today is Robert Martin and Summer Bourgon from RMA and SH Architects, Josiah Fogarty, the structural engineer, Sean Stanhead, and then we have Matt Knight, Manager, Design and Construction, Facilities at the City of Ottawa. Next slide, please. The building is located in the center of Lansdowne Park, which is in the Glebe and is adjacent to the Vito Canal. Next slide. The Aberdeen Pavilion was constructed in 1898. It was designed by architect Moses C. Heady and constructed by the Dominion Bridge Company. It is a structural steel and pressed metal exhibition hall. The building has heritage status at the municipal, provincial, and federal level, is designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and is a National Historic Site. It is also subject to an easement with the Ontario Heritage Trust, and the proposed rehabilitation will require their permission. The project team has been working closely with the trust, and they are supportive of this project. Next slide. The building is an iconic heritage building in Ottawa. It's the only large-scale exhibition building in Canada surviving from the 19th century, and it's an important engineering achievement in Ottawa as the first use of long-span steel arches which are exposed to the interior. I'll now pass it along to Matt Knight, who will provide an overview of the project details.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you, committee. Next slide, please. Infrastructure and Water Services is rehabilitating Aberdeen Pavilion as part of our standard life cycle program. The work proposed builds on past city conservation activities in 1992 and 2017 and was prompted by a 2019 condition audit identifying sources of water infiltration and deterioration of certain building elements. This project is distinct from the Lansdowne 2.0 project. However, both teams are in regular communication and schedules are being carefully coordinated to minimize impacts to residents, businesses, and the Lansdowne 2.0 project. Funding has been secured for design, construction administration, and essential structural work. Further funding needs will be identified as part of the 2025 budget process. And now I'll hand off to Summer, who will take us through some of the further project details.
Next slide, please. So the project as a whole is focusing on the rehabilitation of the entirety of the building envelope. As Matthew mentioned, there are significant concerns with the roof, so that is the main scope of work for the project. In addition to metalwork repairs, structural strengthening, rehabilitation of windows, doors, concrete floor, and lead paint abatement inside the building. So that's just a general snapshot of the whole project. Next slide, please. When we started this project, or I guess when City of Ottawa started this project back in 2021, one of the main focuses at the beginning was documentation. And as you can see there in the photo, they've commissioned a laser scan back in 2021 of the entire building. And we've actually just completed another set of laser scanning with Multivista in 2024 as well. So we have significant documentation to work from to capture all the conditions in the building. We also did a detailed condition assessment with the Army plus SH and Stantec team in 2023 from the ground and by lift. So up close review to capture all the conditions and thousands of photos as well for record. In 2023, we completed tie rod scanning. So there's tie rods that span between the trusses inside the building. So we did scanning to locate those tie rods and also did some slab investigations to look into the rehabilitation of the slab. Hazardous material sampling was done this year, as well as some lead paint removal mock-ups, which were completed a couple weeks ago. And coming up as well, there's going to be some geotechnical investigations done in support of the project. So a really comprehensive investigations and documentation package to kick it off. And going forward with this project through the design, we've also been looking heavily at the 1992-1993 Julian Smith restoration package, which was completed at that time. And that's been a really sound basis for our design as well. Next slide, please. So looking at each of the individual components, the roof is really the big ticket item here, as Matt mentioned, with the water infiltration that was noted in our infiltration report. The condition of the roof is very poor. Water effectively finds its way in through any little hole. There's no waterproofing membrane on the roof. And due to the ongoing water infiltration that's been happening over many decades, the wood boards and purlins have also significantly deteriorated as part of the roof deck. So the main focus of this project is replacing the roof. The bell cast roof, which is the large slope roof that you see there, as a Spanish tile, pressed Spanish tile roofing system. We're going to be replacing it with replica Spanish tiles, adding a waterproofing membrane because none exists right now, and replacing the wood board decking and wood purlins as well. In addition, with some of the ice and snow buildup issues that we're seeing on the roof, we are adding a heat trace system along the eaves and replacing the existing heat trace system on the north and south pavilion entrances. Next slide, please. At the dome and clear story and east and west entry roofs, these are currently corrugated roofing systems. They are also going to be replaced with lead coated copper system, same as the replica Spanish tile, which will replicate the pattern of the corrugated roofing in a pressed tile. We are going to be adding the waterproofing membrane on the clear story roof and the east and west roofs, and doing localized replacement of the decking at this level, as it's not as deteriorated as the bell cast roof. On the turrets and cupola, these roofing systems are slightly different, flat sheet roofing. They're in fairly good condition, so they're just going to be locally repaired and repainted. The turrets and the floor of the cupola are fairly corroded, so they will be replaced in kind with new galvanized sheet. And the ceilings as well, which you can't really see in these photos, but the ceilings inside the cupola and the turrets will be replaced in kind with new wood board. Next slide, please. Wood windows and doors. The windows are a fairly significant portion of this project as well. They were replaced in the 1992-1993 restoration for the most part, but they have seen some significant deterioration, peeling paint, a little bit of water infiltration, failed putty, that sort of thing. So we're going to be doing a full kind of restoration campaign for windows, stripping paint, doing repairs, and applying new paint to all the sashes and frames. The large wood doors that you see here were also replaced in 1992, 1993 restoration. Unfortunately, the replicas are in very poor condition, and you can kind of see here in the photo, there's some racking that's occurring of the doors, and they're actually struggling to open and close them because they kind of grab onto the ground when you're trying to pull them open. And there's significant rot and many interventions that have been made to them over time to try and correct the racking. So as part of this project, and given that they're not original to the building, we are going to be replacing them in kind with replicas that are constructed slightly differently to have stronger connections. The transoms above the doors are in fairly good condition with that minor localized deterioration. So they will be restored as part of the project. Next slide, please. The exterior walls are predominantly in good condition. There's local areas of deterioration, peeling paint, damage. So this aspect of the building will just see repairs and repainting as needed, with some replacements where elements are too deteriorated to economically repair. As part of the, I guess, functionality improvements for the building, we will be introducing 2 removable wall panels on the south side of the building to accommodate temporary AC units that are brought in throughout the year for events. Currently, what is being done is that sets of windows are being temporarily removed to accommodate running the ducting from the AC units into the building. So we're introducing a more permanent solution that will be less intrusive than temporarily removing those sensitive windows in the building. Next slide, please. On the interior, we have lead paint on pretty much every exterior wall surface. So the light yellow paint that you see in the building, which is also on the structure, is lead containing. So as part of this project, especially given the condition of the lead paint in many areas peeling, we are going to be fully stripping all of the lead paint. We're currently looking at many different options for removal, including dry ice, laser ablation, chemical, as through those lead paint removal mock-ups. And then when everything's been stripped and cleaned, we're going to be repainting in the same color with a non-lead containing paint, of course. The concrete floor slab is going to see rehabilitation works, and then the steel structure, which is pretty iconic to the inside space of this building, is going to just see local repairs and strengthening. Some additional members added at the base of the roof to assist with the roof loading, and any new steel that's added is going to be date stamped and bolted to distinguish upon close inspection. Next slide.
Thank you, Summer. Staff are recommending approval of the application as the rehabilitation conserves the cultural heritage value of the Aberdeen Pavilion as identified in the Statement of Cultural Heritage Value and the National Historic Site Statement of Significance. As detailed in the staff report, the rehabilitation meets the standards and guidelines, and the heritage attributes of this important building will be conserved. Next slide. The approval is conditional upon the implementation of the conservation approach identified in the description of proposed work and conservation elevations attached to the report, and on providing samples of all final exterior materials. Next slide. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We did receive correspondence from Heritage Ottawa, and Heritage Ottawa is also registered to speak if they want to take advantage of that opportunity. Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. Questions to staff. Member Madigan.
Thank you, Chair. I'll abstain from voting on this since I have previous working relationship with RMA, but just a question to clarify. The metal roofing is being replaced with lead-coated copper. Is lead-coated copper being painted to continue the painted appearance of the roof itself? Because it seems for a lot of time it's always been sort of shiny aluminized or some other metal paint.
So currently we're not planning to paint lead coated copper because it has a natural silver finish. It will weather and darken over time. It can be painted if the city desires. So we're hoping to kind of eliminate the need for paint, obviously, because it's a significant maintenance item on this building and given the size of it as well. But it can be painted in the future if they so choose.
I guess question for staff. So staff already assessed that as an option and whether to paint or not.
Thank you, Chair. Staff has looked at this as an option. Right now, the intent is to reduce the operational cost for the building. As Summer mentioned, the cost of painting that roof is quite extensive. So at this time, with the budget that we have available, we're looking at just installing the lead-coated copper.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Menard.
Thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate the report from staff and I'm in support of the report and the work to be done on this historic feature in our city. I want to thank them for working with our office on it as well. I guess my question is just the process from here and how the design advances with the work advancing and the work that they'll do with the community, I guess hand in glove. So I guess just a comment from staff, if possible, about how that work will be planned out in conjunction with our office and again the local community that will be and the businesses in the area that'll be seeing the impact of the important and necessary work. I just hope to get a comment from staff on that.
Thank you, Chair and Councillor. The project team has been in regular communication with all stakeholders. We regularly are in contact with the programming groups at Aberdeen. And over the course of the design, we will continue to reach out. At this point, we're expecting to wrap up design towards the end of this year. And so you will see continued conversations with the project team.
Okay, I do appreciate that. The Engage Ottawa site will be up for this and input still being taken in. And then can I get a commitment just to work with folks like Bill Price at the Glebe Communities Association, their heritage expert, and a few others in the community that have engaged in this project? That would be very helpful as we continue on. And I know you've engaged our office thoroughly on this to date. Just want to continue that.
Yes, absolutely. We would be happy to work with anybody.
Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you so much. Member Quinn.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to start out by congratulating the staff on an excellent presentation and clearly excellent research work done in preparation for this important project for a beloved building in our city. And I also just wanted to take the opportunity to point out that the steel structure that is the essence of the building is the product of the Dominion Bridge Company, which is the same company that built the Alexandra Bridge. And I think this is another excellent example, opportunity to point out that these are excellent examples of in-kind replacement and restoration work that can be undertaken on an historic structure, which unfortunately we did not see as this morning as a possible approach to the Alexandra Bridge. And my final question, my first question to staff as I close this comment is to just hear from you as to what the standards that you are going to be using when considering the contractors and people who are actually going to be working on the building with these sort of special materials and consideration for the heritage values. So can you answer that?
So the City of Ottawa has actually been an excellent client on this project. They are on board and supportive of doing a pre-qualification process for contractors. So we're actually working with procurement at the city right now to issue pre-qualification documents that specifically request subcontractors with specializations in heritage materials for up to 8 different specialists to be included at the construction stage. Anything from you, Matt?
Thank you. That's very reassuring, and I expected nothing less, but I just wanted to give you the opportunity to share that with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I don't see any other hands raised. I just also wanted to take the opportunity to thank staff for the tremendous amount of work that they've undertaken on this file around the rehabilitation of the pavilion. As we know, what's before us will address the long-term conservation of the building since its last major rehabilitation in the early 1990s. When we were having also wider conversations about whether the building should just generally be preserved. And we're at a better state. So I'm really pleased that we're having this conversation about the resources or approving at least the application. Council will, as we know, have a wider conversation during the budget process as to the resources that will need to be dedicated. But it's, of course, important that we dedicate such resources since many people see the Aberdeen Pavilion as one of the crown jewels of our city. So I really wanted to just thank staff for the extensive work that is proposed. The depth and the breadth is quite incredible, as well as the collaboration with many stakeholders, including the Ontario Heritage Trust. We heard that you're continuing consultation with the local ward councillor's office, Councillor Menard, which is very important, as well as the public. So I just wanted to thank you for that work. And is the report carried? Carried. Thank you so much. So this report will be submitted to City Council tomorrow on July 10th for consideration. Our next item is designation of 85 Primrose Avenue East, 755 Somerset Street West, and 90 Primrose Avenue East, 96 Empress Avenue under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. There is, to my understanding, a technical amendment, and we will ask Vice Chair Plante to read that in before we move forward with a presentation from staff.
Whereas sorry, I was eating. Whereas the report ACS 2024 PDB RHU 0035 recommends the insurance of a notice of intention to designate 90 and 96 Empress Avenue according to the Statement of Cultural Heritage Value attached to document 9. And whereas based on community feedback, staff recommend adding one additional heritage attribute to document 9 to recognize the stained glass window of the west facade of the building. Therefore, be it resolved that the list of heritage attributes in document 9 be amended to include the following additional attribute as the fourth bullet on page 8 of the document: tripartite stained glass window with stones surround on the west facade. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much. And now we can proceed with a presentation from staff.
Good morning, Chair King, Vice Chair Plante, and Built Heritage Committee members. Today I'm presenting on Heritage staff's recommendation to designate a cluster of purpose-built religious properties in West Centertown. Next slide. More specifically, the properties being recommended for designation are located at the top of an escarpment known as Primrose Hill overlooking Le Breton Flats. These properties include 3 purpose-built religious institutions: the former Couvent Notre-Dame du Rosaire at 85 Primrose Avenue East, former École Saint-Jean-Baptiste at 755 Somerset Street West, and the monastery complex including Église Catholique de la Paroisse Saint-Jean-Baptiste, which spans 2 property parcels, 90 Primrose Avenue East and 96 Empress Avenue. These properties are linked due to their close proximity, construction dates, and ecclesiastical use. Next slide, please. The 3 buildings were constructed between the late 19th century and the early 20th century and are all limestone construction, historically contributing to the growing Catholic Francophone community in the late 19th century in the area surrounding Primrose Hill. Together, they play a role in defining the area and stand as tangible evidence of this area's educational and religious landscape, reflecting the historic French-Canadian character of the area. Next slide, please. The first building being recommended for designation is 85 Primrose Avenue East, which is the former Couvent Notre Dame du Rosaire. This building meets 6 out of 9 criteria. The convent was designed by Georges Bouillon, architect of the Ottawa Diocese, and constructed in 1890. It is a representative example of a 19th century convent with Second Empire influences and classical ornamentation. The attributes that reflect this style include its mansard roof with evenly spaced gabled dormers, natural limestone construction, and its balanced asymmetrical facade. As a purpose-built convent by the Grey Nuns of the Cross, this building is associated with the education of young French women in the early 20th century. Notable women who attended this convent include Jeanne Sauvé, Canada's first female Speaker of the House and Governor General, as well as Henriette Bourque, the first female lawyer to work for the Federal Department of Justice. Next slide, please. The next building is the former École Saint-Jean-Baptiste at 755 Somerset Street West. This property meets 5 out of the 9 criteria. The school was constructed circa 1887 and is a representative example of a purpose-built late 19th century stone French language Roman Catholic school with neoclassical elements. The attributes that reflect this style include, but are not limited to, the entrance porticos, regular coarse limestone walls, decorative carved namestone, and smooth limestone banding with central limestone cross with corbel. The building has historical and associative value due to its direct association with the development of French language education in Ontario and the opposition to Regulation 17, which was a 1912 provincial regulation that made English language instruction mandatory in elementary schools. The school was also part of the Institute of Christian Schools and run by the Ontario Christian Brothers, who played a crucial role in the development and expansion of Ontario's publicly funded Catholic separate school system. However, it must be acknowledged that since the 1980s, a difficult legacy of harsh discipline and physical and sexual abuse by many members of the order across North America has surfaced. Next slide, please. Last is the monastery complex, which includes a seminary, interior cloister, courtyard, stone wall, and Église catholique de la Paroisse Saint-Jean-Baptiste. So this complex is a rare example of a monastery in Ottawa from the late 19th and early 20th century. This property meets 8 of the 9 criteria. The original structure, which was partially burnt, was designed by Father Joseph Mouchard, and the reconstruction in addition was designed by Georges Bouillon. The complex displays a high degree of architectural integrity and craftsmanship and is a landmark due to its visual prominence and social importance. The property is associated with the Père Dominicain d'Ottawa, which is a Francophone order involved in education. They have owned, preached, and studied on these lands from the time of its construction to its present-day use as the Dominican University College. Next slide, please. Key exterior attributes that contribute to the heritage value include its enclosed monastic plan with central courtyard and interior cloister, its limestone perimeter walls, limestone panels incised with a Latin Dominican cross, a metal fence featuring Latin cross details, a buttress bell tower, and evenly spaced stained glass windows. The interior is not included in the designation as it has been altered. Staff also believe by excluding the interior, it allows for the greatest flexibility for this space. Next slide, please. Each of the properties are recommended for individual designation under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, as they are all early stone buildings associated with a religious entity and the growth of Francophone education. They also contribute to our understanding of the area. Together, they stand as evidence of this area's earliest education and religious landscape. Staff have reviewed the properties and determined that each property meets at least 5 of the 9 criteria for designation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. We did receive correspondence from 10 residents as well as Heritage Ottawa and the Dalhousie Community Association. And we have 5 registered speakers starting with Heritage Ottawa. Thank you so much, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I would just ask first for clarification on which stained glass window is one stained glass window you have added?
Through you, Chair, that's correct. We've added an additional stained glass window on the west facade, but the other stained glass windows have already been captured in the statement.
Okay, thank you. That was one of the comments that Heritage Ottawa made, because the stained glass window, I think the one that's been added is the Guido Ninciari stained glass window. For those of you who may not know, he is a very famous Italian-Canadian worker in stained glass who did a lot of work in Ottawa, including St. Anthony's Church. He did frescoes and all of the windows, and apparently he did some of the architectural design as well. So he deserves to be remembered wherever he can be found in Ottawa. The other thing I wanted to speak about just briefly is, in addition to Henriette Bourque, who is mentioned in the staff report, there's another Bourque who should be mentioned, Juliette Bourque, who was the chief librarian of the Public Archives of Canada Library. We librarians have to stand up for each other. She had a very interesting career, and apparently her sister Georgette, I think it was Georgette, was the organist at Saint Jean-Baptiste Church. And I don't have evidence of that, but I do have some information about Juliette Bourque for your files.
Thank you.
And finally, I did want to address the issue of the cultural landscape. I was a bit confused, and it may be me. There are two landscapes. One of them is, it was on one of your slides where you showed the overhead view. One of them is what I would call the cloistered landscape, surrounded by the church and the monastery. I think that's the one you may be referring to. However, the other landscape that I think needs attention is the southern yard or courtyard, which is bordered by the stone walls, which you have mentioned, but the trees and the landscape itself are not mentioned. I understand that there may be some concern about possible development of that land, but I think the more than the walls should be included in the list of heritage characteristics, at least some of the trees bordering the stone wall along Empress Street. I think it would be important to include those. So those are the comments that I have submitted, and I hope that you may consider these comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I believe Councillor Troster has a question for you.
I just wanted to thank you very much for mentioning the green space. It's obviously very important to the surrounding community, and it's something that my office is very much willing to work with the new owners of the property on. You know, there was at some point some interest in even trying to acquire the green space as a city park. I know the community was really pushing for that, but I was really glad to see that the Dominican property was purchased by the French Catholic School Board. So having it for school use opens the opportunity to perhaps preserve some of that green space, and I think that's a really good thing. So thank you so much.
And thank you for your delegation. The next registered speaker is Ed McKenna. Thank you, and I see you've joined us online. Please go ahead, you have 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak briefly today. I serve as Vice President of the Dalhousie Community Association. Our President, Catherine Boucher, is not able to attend today's meeting, and I regret that I can't be there in person. But we think it's important to be here, at least in this form today. The Dalhousie Community Association represents the residents of Le Breton Flats, Little Italy, and Chinatown, including the area in which the Dominican properties are located. We want to be here to express the support of the residents we represent for the designation of these properties under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. City staff have done great work to provide an excellent history of these properties and the rationale for this designation. And so I just want to mention a couple of things that are especially important to the community. As we said in our letter of support, These properties already play important roles in the community and in addition to their traditional functions. 755 Somerset West, the former École Saint-Jean-Baptiste and former Dalhousie Community Center is owned by the Somerset West Community Health Center, which provides critically important services in our community. And we're pleased to see the recent announcement that 96 Empress East will be home to a new French language secondary school operated by the Center East Catholic School Council. And we also want to emphasize that this property was originally developed by the Dominicans with what we now call green space at the center of its design. And much of this green space remains, as we've already heard, including extensive tree cover in the southeast quadrant. Now, this is important to us because our area has the least amount of park space and the least tree canopy per capita in the city. And now we recognize that the area enclosed by the limestone walls is not part of the designation, but the preservation of these properties and the stone walls is essential to retaining the original design and the green space that is integral to it. We live in an area where there is great intensification, yet we rarely see green space like this included in the design of new developments, despite the great need for it. The Dominican properties show us what can be done, and for this reason, and those articulated in the staff reports and in our letter, we support the proposed designations. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your delegation. I don't see any hands raised, so much appreciated. Thank you for joining us this morning. The next registered speaker is David Jeans.
Thank you, Chair. This is very much personal support for the proposed designations. This area means a lot to me. I took piano lessons when I was in high school, diagonally opposite the old Saint-Jean-Baptiste High School at Empress and Somerset. About 25 years ago, I attended regular community meetings at the Dalhousie Community Center in that high school for the City Center Coalition. In fact, I think that's probably where I met Linda Hode. 19 years ago, I became a tenant at the Bronson Center, which is at Bronson and Primrose, so right there. As part of Doors Open, which I've been involved with for its whole existence, I've visited the Dominican College and the library with its wonderful stained glass windows. I even helped organize a funeral in Saint Jean-Baptiste Church for Transport Action, which was ecumenical, presided over by Dominican, Jesuit, and United Church minister. And it was not only ecumenical, it was bilingual. Finally, I'm reviving weekend after next, a very popular Heritage Ottawa walking tour called Cathedral Hill to Nannygoat Hill, which is very much focused on that area. And in fact, the tour includes all the buildings that are proposed for designation here. This is a revival of a tour given a number of years ago, and it is very popular. It's been sold out for weeks. So we're looking forward to that. Just reinforcing the heritage importance, certainly the French presence in that community, much diminished now, but it's historically very important because it was the first such Francophone settlement really outside Lower Town. The architect Georges Bouillon, who's mentioned, I think not mentioned in the report, he's also responsible for that wonderful interior of Notre Dame Basilica, because he was a priest architect, he was the priest at Notre Dame, and he was given the responsibility of creating that interior in the 1870s. The name Primrose Hill in the report was a little new to me. Actually, the famous Primrose Hill is in London, and is the site of London's first railway tunnel, to go back to that theme. Usually people call it Nanny Goat Hill, though I did discover when I Google searched, almost all the hits were to this report when you look up Primrose Hill, Ottawa. But it was called that by a nun who wrote about the 1900 fire. So yes, the name Primrose Hill has been used, but really most people think of it as Nanny Goat Hill. The last thing I wanted to mention is that in designating it, I would have designated the church as a landmark. It's not mentioned as a landmark in the Regulation 906 criteria, but that church is visible from every part of Le Breton Flats. It's a dominant feature of the West End skyline. And so I would certainly have called it a landmark, even though the proposed designation does not. Anyway, that's it. Thank you very much, and strong support for the designations.
Thank you so much for your delegation. I see no questions, but once again, thank you so much for really outlining the history, both cultural and personal. We appreciate that. So our next registered speaker is Marc-Antoine Bouchard. And you have 5 minutes. Hello.
Bonjour. Oui, donc Marc-Antoine Béchard, je représente aujourd'hui le lieu dominicain Ottawa pour les 90 Primrose, 96 Empress. Notre déclaration va être assez courte, là. En fait, bon, la principale préoccupation des Dominicains, c'est que la désignation n'entrave pas et ne complexifie pas, outre mesure, la poursuite d'un projet d'aménagement d'un pavillon d'école secondaire qui est mené par le Conseil des écoles catholiques du Centre-Est. Dans le bâtiment, c'est un projet qui a été annoncé là, le pas dernier. C'est un projet que les Dominicains souhaitent voir se réaliser pour 2 raisons principalement. D'abord, parce qu'il perpétue la nature institutionnelle, éducative, francophone et catholique du bâtiment du site. Et puis parce que c'est un projet qui permettrait de trouver une utilisation permanente pour l'avenir du bâtiment dans un contexte où l'utilisation du bâtiment a diminué là, au rythme du déclin de la communauté des frères d'Ottawa. Donc voilà, c'était assez court, simplement pour vous faire part de notre préoccupation dans cette désignation-là. Merci.
Merci. Vice Chair Plante.
Oui, bonjour Marc-Antoine, merci d'être là aujourd'hui. Alors, étiez-vous au courant que ça allait être acheté par le conseil scolaire ou non?
Oui, on est au courant.
Ah, OK. Et je ne sais pas quand ça va ouvrir, mais j'imagine que ça va garder un peu, disons, le patrimoine catholique de l'emplacement, ou est-ce que ça vous préoccupe ou non?
Mais ça nous préoccupe dans la mesure où, vous savez, le CECCE, c'est une organisation francophone catholique. Je vois que, donc, pour les Dominicains, évidemment, là, c'est un partenaire de premier choix pour ce bâtiment-là. Donc, voilà.
OK, merci beaucoup.
Merci. I don't see any other questions, so merci, thank you. The last registered speaker on this item is Iqbal El Katani.
Bonjour, je représente le Conseil des écoles catholiques du Centre-Est. Je vous remercie de nous avoir donné l'occasion de prendre part à ce panel. Je rejoins Marc-Antoine Béchard dans sa déclaration. C'est juste pour dire que effectivement, nous comptons bientôt ouvrir un pavillon scolaire au niveau du Collège catholique du Centre-Est. Et nous sommes ravis donc de perpétuer de perpétuer justement cette continuité de catholicisme et d'encouragement de la langue française dans le couvent. Et nous nous inscrivons dans les objectifs de la ville aussi de préserver ce patrimoine qui est un patrimoine national de la ville. Donc voilà, nous exprimons notre parfaite collaboration avec la ville dans la préservation du patrimoine, tout en espérant que cette classification permettra au Conseil des écoles catholiques du Centre-Est de jouer pleinement son rôle dans l'éducation et dans la perpétuité de l'enseignement. Voilà, donc mon intervention était très brève également. Et je vous remercie encore une fois de nous avoir donné cette chance de participer à cette rencontre. Merci.
Merci. I don't see any other hands raised for questions, so thank you so much for your delegation. At this time, are there any questions for staff? Member Madigan.
Thank you, Chair. Not a question, but just thank you for the report and the research into the buildings. I think it's very important to, when we research buildings and generate reports, that we both highlight the positive and negative history associated with the buildings, because if we do not, we're going to forget that history. I myself was, educated in Christian Brother facility. I got a good education from them. I also know people who did not get a good education from them. And some of the buildings that they possessed were torn down in my hometown of St. John's, Newfoundland, and built over. And then without sort of that building and perhaps commemorative plaques to understand the history, we forget. There's also the aspect of, it's not just indigenous people who are sort of being assimilated. It's the idea of French people are being assimilated as well to speak English. And my father-in-law, who's a francophone from New Brunswick, he's passed away now, but recounted a story to me where he was told to, as he said, speak white in a bar when he was speaking French. And this idea of the law of 17 is an aspect I wasn't really familiar with. So it's a learning experience reading the report about that. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those comments. Councillor Troster.
Thank you so much, Chair. So first of all, thank you so much to staff. These three buildings are really important to West Centertown. And as you saw in the correspondence, these designations have a huge amount of community support. A few little known facts. So 755 Somerset West has, in addition to all of the amazing history put together, it was at one point owned by the city as a community center. And then it was sold for $1 to the Somerset West Community Health Center. And now has this amazing multi-generational feature to it. In the middle floor is the Door Youth Drop-In Center. Downstairs is the Yet Keen Chinese Seniors Center. And up on the top floor, there's an early years center. So you've got 3 generations in that building. So it really, its current community use is so valuable to the community. Another little known fact is the chimney at Dominican College is actually a habitat for chimney swifts. Yeah. And so apparently around 8:30 p.m., neighbors come out to Upper Lorne Place and they look up to see hundreds of these birds flying into the chimney. It's very cool. Everybody tells me about it. I have not yet seen the swift migration. I know that, it's my understanding there's some provincial environmental protections on the chimney in particular. Do you think you could just tell us about those? Just the random things you learn as a counselor.
I can try to, because I did a lot of research on this as well. And under the acts and regulation, it is an offense to kill, hunt, capture, injure, or harass a migratory bird, or to damage, destroy, remove, or disturb its nest, eggs, or residence without a permit. So I think it has to go through provincial or federal approvals to disrupt its habitat. So they are protected.
Okay, and would this heritage designation protect the chimney?
So the chimney is not listed as an attribute, as it is more of a modern addition. It's a brick chimney. It's not stone like the rest of the building. So it hasn't been identified, but it has other protections through the provincial and federal protections of the bird.
Okay, excellent. No, seriously, many times neighbors have invited me to come for a walk at 8:30 to see the swift migration. So I'm very much looking forward to this. And to the French Catholic School Board, we want to say welcome to your community. There was a lot of anticipation when that building went up for sale and a lot of worry. And I think knowing that it's going to an educational institution is very exciting. But to me, the mature trees on the former Dominican College site are a huge part of the heritage value. And I'll just put it out to the applicant that we'd be happy to work with them to preserve that green space and to find ways to make it workable for them in terms of school hours, but also accessible to the public on off hours. Because as previous delegates mentioned, it's a really precious piece of green space in a community that has almost none. So it's very, very important. But other than that, I just wanted to thank staff. This is a really wonderful report. I got a real education today. I really appreciated it. And you have a ton of community support behind you. And thank you to everybody who wrote in and who came to present today. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Member Madigan.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on the presentation, and it was Swift or Swifties, as common sort of understanding of Swift is. The trees, are the trees protected through other city bylaws?
I think it would depend on the size, Mr. Chair. They would be protected. The city does have an urban tree conservation bylaw. But I don't know the exact, parameters of these trees specifically. I think we'd have to look at that more in detail.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. And I just had one question that I think emerged from one of the delegations. I was just wondering if you could comment around the decision or non-decision to designate the church as a landmark, and whether that could be redressed if it's determined that it should be designated.
Thank you, Chair. So through staff's evaluation, we did say that the property does meet criteria 9, which is that the property has contextual value because it is a landmark. So we have identified that in the statement as the monastery complex has contextual value because it is landmark due to its visual prominence and social importance within the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't see any other hands raised for questions to staff. So is the motion carried? And is the report carried as amended? Thank you so much. So this report will be submitted to City Council tomorrow on July 10th for consideration. Our next item is the designation of St. Margaret's Anglican Church, and we have a presentation from staff.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of committee. Heritage staff are recommending the designation of St. Margaret's Anglican Church at 206 Montreal Road under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. You can go to the next slide, please. St. Margaret's Anglican Church is located at the southeast intersection of Montreal Road and Cody Avenue in the Vanier neighborhood of Ottawa. Vanier's neighborhood boundary follows the limits of the former municipality, the city of Vanier, and the western edge of Vanier is defined by the Rideau River. Next slide, please. The cultural heritage value of St. Margaret's Anglican Church is found in its design, its historical associations, and also in its context. St. Margaret's Anglican Church was found to have design value as a representative example of the Gothic Revival architecture inspired by the early English period. Typical of Gothic Revival styles, the church features a steeply pitched gable roof, coarse stone, a tower with embattlements, buttresses, and pointed arch openings. St. Margaret's Anglican Church has historical value for its direct association with the Church of England and its establishment in the Ottawa area. The church was built as a church of ease for St. Bartholomew's in New Edinburgh, and its founding echoes settlement patterns in Gloucester Township. St. Margaret's Anglican Church yields information about the community and culture of Inuit Anglicans, as the property is a place of worship and gathering site for an Inuit Anglican congregation. Next slide, please. Constructed between 1887 and 1888, the historic church demonstrates the work of Frederick T. Thomas, a recognized British-trained civil engineer and architect. His name is connected to several notable projects in the region, including Ottawa Waterworks, the West Block Extension, and the Adashran Synagogue, the former synagogue on Murray Street. The property is important in defining the character of Old Janeville, founding village in what is now known as Vanier. St. Margaret's predates the buildings in its immediate vicinity and is a rare extant example of an early village building constructed in stone. St. Margaret's Anglican Church is physically connected to its surroundings, as the stones used to build the church came from the nearby Gloucester quarries. Functionally, the church and parish hall served and continue to serve families and organizations in the immediate vicinity, as well as across Ottawa and Gatineau. Visually, the building's low height, modest massing, and setback on Montreal Road are typical of buildings from early Janeville. As one of the first churches constructed in the area on land from the Olmsted family, who were early pioneers in Janeville, St. Margaret's is historically linked to settlement in the area. St. Margaret's Anglican Church is also a well-known local landmark. Its visible corner location on Montreal Road at Cody Avenue lends prominence to the building. St. Margaret's has been a continuous presence in the neighborhood for over 130 years. I think this year is 136. The imposing stone structure stands as a marker of 19th century Janeville. We can go to the next slide, please. Some of the key attributes that contribute to the property's cultural heritage value include its steeply pitched gable roof, load-bearing coarse stone with a natural finish, a 3-story offset square tower with embattlements, a pyramidal roof, pointed openings, as well as a narrow vertical opening on one side. The building has short stone buttresses that are bonded into low walls. It has a semicircular apse and a conical roof over the chancel. Next slide, please. Additional attributes included pointed openings that are trimmed with stone voussoirs, including louvered windows, stained glass windows, and a rouleau-shaped window opening on the west facade. There are wooden entrance doors with heavier metal hinges, and the parish hall has a side gable roof. It has 5 bays with matching coarse stone and rectangular openings. There's a wrought iron cross at the peak of the chancel roof. That's another attribute, as well as a cornerstone that's shown on the slide that has the inscription St. Margaret's Church AD 1887. 1887 is when the cornerstone was laid. The contextual value of St. Margaret's Church is embodied in its corner location right at Montreal Road at Cody Avenue. You can go to the next slide, please. Through research and evaluation, heritage staff have determined that St. Margaret's Anglican Church is a strong candidate for designation under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The property was found to meet 7 of the 9 criteria as set out in Ontario Regulation 906, and staff recommend issuing a notice of intention to designate. I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We did receive correspondence both from Heritage Ottawa and the Anglican Diocese of Ottawa. And we do have 2 registered speakers. Heritage Ottawa. Okay, thank you so much. So there was nothing to add. The next registered speaker is Joel Prentice. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us, and you will have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chair, councillors and members and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this motion or to this issue. So my name is Joel Prentice. I'm the Director of Property and Asset Management with the Anglican Diocese of Ottawa. And the position of the parish, and to my right, we have Colin McFarland, Reverend Colin McFarland of St. Margaret's. And the position of the parish and of our diocese is that we object to the notion of intention to designate. Both St. Margaret's as well as the Anglican Diocese of Ottawa are registered charities serving Vanier and the broader National Capital Region. A heritage designation for the exterior of St. Margaret's would, in a few ways, impair the ability of us as not-for-profit charities to operate effectively. While it's understood that St. Margaret's certainly has an appeal architecturally, culturally, historically. That was obviously mentioned in detail a moment ago. And knowing that we as a diocese take great pride in our existing properties, which are already designated as heritage, with Christ Church Cathedral on Spark Street as a timeless example, we feel that a designation of St. Margaret's is a more complex proposition, and we believe it requires a more contextual examination. It's our view that there would be negative impacts from a heritage designation, both in the short term operationally and from a long-term asset management perspective. Both scenarios see the broader community impacted in ways that I don't think were addressed thus far. Upon heritage designation, there would be a lack of operational agility in dealing with property concerns, repairs, capital expenditures on the exterior of the building envelope, et cetera. Increased expenses for professional services, time, and materials would be incurred, and added volunteer coordination would be required to steer the fixed asset portion of the church, which would draw away volunteer resources and other resources from the human element within Vanier and beyond. We would respectfully wish to prioritize and allocate more resource to the latter over the former. Additionally, our annual insurance renewals, diocese-wide and parish by parish, have already involved unsustainable double-digit premium increases in the last several years, in large part due to the increasing level or amount rather of shock loss events that are taking place nationwide in the church space and just in general. Faith-based insurers have shown a tendency to level up the premiums of heritage-designated properties over their non-heritage counterparts, given the more specific and costly requirements around restoration of these heritage church properties in the event of partial or total loss. So this designation would absolutely increase the fixed insurance costs of St. Margaret's. Another insurance consideration is that we as a diocese have a level of self-insurance in order to keep our insurance structure affordable. So there's a certain deductible threshold that we absorb ourselves for any sort of minor losses. And this comes directly out of our cash flow, which could be allocated any number of ways to serve the community. If we were to have a heritage designation, certainly there would be a higher draw on that if we were to have to put a claim through our own program. So these two operational factors in the event of a heritage designation would drag on the effectiveness of St. Margaret's, which serves a crucial role in its community and requires as little resistance as possible in doing so. And from an asset management perspective, our diocese leans on its property portfolio to support both its spiritual and community ministries. Council would be familiar with the efforts of a pair of diocesan community ministries, Cornerstone Housing for Women being one and Belong Ottawa being another. Belong Ottawa with their multiple drop-in centers in the downtown core. They are examples rather of the Anglican Diocese of Ottawa's daily efforts to serve the broader community. Asset disposition, although it's unpredictable and infrequent within our diocese, serves to consolidate and strengthen our ministries as needed. And I wish to preface this and be clear in saying that there are currently zero indications that St. Margaret's is experiencing decline, but should conditions change in the generations to come, a heritage designation would depress the market value of the property. And if a sale was to be explored, this heritage designation would reduce the portion of the return on a sale that would be allocated to our community ministries and essentially to the streets of Ottawa. So we rely on the proceeds of property disposition, and St. Martin's Anglican Church in the Carlingwood area, having been sold to another faith group this year, would be an example of that within our diocese. We rely on those proceeds to make a positive impact on the community and ministry efforts around the city. And we want the committee to know how crucial that agility in asset management is to us as a diocese. Although I have pointed out some operational and asset management based concerns, I don't intend to speak to the cultural, architectural, historical rationale. Out of respect for the work of the city staff. Instead, we would ask the committee to consider the immediate and long-term negative impacts of a heritage designation on a registered charity that works tirelessly to improve the efforts, rather the lives of those in the community around them. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your delegation. I do see that Vice Chair Plant has raised her hand.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chair King. First of all, I want to give a shout out to Reverend Colin. I see you there in the corner. You guys do amazing, amazing work in the venue area. I think you put on the best parties too, but that's still up for debate. I did have some questions. So I have also Center 454 on King Edward in my area, and that is designated heritage. I know because we had some issues with the fencing that they had to put around it, and there was some heritage considerations. So you guys say you use asset management to help, if I'm understanding correctly, fund some of the charitable endeavors that you do in the Ottawa area, but do you not get funding from the city for Belong Ottawa?
That's a very important point, Councillor Plant, and thank you for mentioning that. There's, kind of a symbiotic relationship between Belong Ottawa and the city, and that the city leans on the operations of Belong Ottawa in many ways to address some of the street level concerns, and Belong Ottawa does receive some funding. That being said, it's not nearly enough to cover the the budget of Belong Ottawa, and that is supported by the Anglican Diocese of Ottawa. And so one of the revenue streams with which we are able to divert to the efforts of the community ministries does come from property disposition.
Okay, and then what percentage would you say of the city's budget covers it versus your sale of your properties?
That's something that I would have to follow up on specifically so as to not give inaccurate numbers, but I can certainly follow up with you on that.
Yeah, no, I would appreciate it. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for all the work you guys do in our community. It's really, really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't see any other hands raised, but I just had one quick question, and that involved the increase in your insurance costs. So are you saying that your expectation is solely because of a heritage designation that the insurance rates would go up?
Myself and our Director of Financial Ministries had a meeting within the last month or so with our brokers, and we go over line by line, property by property, the premiums and kind of what direction they go. There is an added premium put on heritage properties versus their non-heritage counterparts, as I mentioned, as a result of the increased expectations around remediation, should there be some sort of, fire, flood, shock loss event, that type of thing. And so this type of designation, I understand the importance of it. I was married in Christchurch Cathedral a year back. It's a heritage designated property. We're navigating as we speak, the process to remediate the front steps there. I understand all that, but for a smaller scale parish, there are major implications financially. Insurance is certainly one of them.
Okay, thank you for that. I see that Member Quinn has raised her hand.
I'm sorry, it's more for a comment, not for a direct question, but while I'm here, I just wanted to know if you have approached ecclesiastical insurance. They specialize in insuring historic properties, historic religious properties. That may be your insurer. I don't know. Anyhow, that my hand was raised to make comments, so I'll raise it again afterwards. Sorry about that.
Thank you for the question, and we are with ecclesiastical insurance. Yes.
Thank you so much. I don't see any other hands raised. Did you? Okay. So thank you so much for your delegation.
Yeah, my pleasure. And Reverend McFarlane would like a moment to speak as well. I think he was a late addition in case you were not made aware.
Okay, we did have, I guess, I'm willing to be flexible here, but you had used more than the 5 minutes, and we thought that you would combine the presentation, but I'm fine with just a few short, brief comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, I will be less than 5 minutes. Just as Joel is speaking as a colleague and from a strategic view of our whole diocesan church, which we are increasingly working together across the region. I'm there on the ground 6 days a week working, and I just wanted to raise 2 points. The first, the parishioners of St. Margaret's are very generous givers, and the parishioners love the parish, the people first, and of course, love the building. I can attest to that, and care deeply and have been good stewards of it for over 130 years. We are volunteer driven, not just in our operations, but financially as well in our support. And every year when we go over our budgets, we increasingly look at these fixed costs, insurance, employees, contractors, and the margin of room for really the imaginative and the creative work of community building, engaging the neighborhood, the spiritual care we offer in a safe way to all kinds of people, Christian or not. Get smaller and smaller, and so these additional insurance costs and the expenses around working on heritage properties are a real limit or an encumbrance on a small parish, unlike the cathedral, which has an endowment from selling massive property on Cathedral Hill. My second point is, and last one is this, and it's related to the statement of cultural value that is going to be submitted. Were a designation to happen by committee council, it is of great importance to me, and I think I speak for our diocese when I say this, that the parish hall, which is a separate building, a separate structure on the property, although it is joined by a foyer currently, be unambiguously excluded from a heritage designation. The fact that there was, except for one brief mention that it was built in 1910 and there was nothing else in the presentation, I just think is revealing that it really doesn't bear any remarkable historical significance to parish life. It struggles to function in its capacity as the workhorse of the parish in terms of 21st century, it's a late 19th century Victorian building. I work in it every week. It's a very difficult space to work in many respects. And I think that my last addition would just be that the parish hall itself be excluded were a designation to happen. In any case, it struggles to meet its current purposes, and yeah, that's my last point. So thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. Oh, and Councillor Lieber does have a question for you.
Just to make sure I understand, the parish hall is the long building that is at the back of the front portion.
That's right. It's along Cody.
Along
Street.
Cody.
Yeah.
And so that's most of the length or the depth of the lot, eh?
Yeah. So any interest in the diocesan church or the parish and redeveloping the property to meet 21st century needs, community ministries, parish ministry, et cetera, would be really encumbered if we couldn't include both the parking lot and that land. So that was my addition.
Okay. I'll ask staff about that.
And you might have one question from Member Madigan.
This is a question and more just a couple of comments, Chair. I think a lot of property owners, not just designated, but owners of older properties are having challenges with the insurance, and that's a bigger issue to resolve with the insurance industry, and how one can negotiate rates. So appreciate your challenge there. In like a heritage association I'm members of, that's a discussion point about how can one address that and get more reasonable rates for heritage buildings. But it's not just designated buildings; it's just old heritage buildings that are non-designated as well. So it's a challenge for everyone. With respect to designation, I appreciate your point about maybe contracting the footprint of the designation, but even with the designation, there's always allowed to demolish as needed based on the needs of a project. Sandy Hill being an example of that, where it was designated, but in development was agreed to take down the town hall. So in some respects, the designation won't restrict future developments with the right applications. And a third point, sorry, the aspect of maintenance. The designation won't necessarily change the need of who you need to do your maintenance for the building, whether it's designated or not. You're still going to need a mason to do things. unless there's some particular part of it where you might want to have more latitude for change. So there's still flexibility even with designation. I appreciate what you do for the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Member Madigan, for those comments, and thank you so much for your delegation. They're much appreciated. Questions to staff? Councillor Leeper.
So I am looking at that, and certainly St. Margaret's is, it's a gem on Montreal Road. And I can certainly understand wanting to protect the main, the most interesting part of the building that faces the street. But the church hall and the parking lot represent obviously a really significant development opportunity moving forward. The Anglican Diocese has been very active in terms of trying to make sure that we're building housing in Ottawa. What would be your defense of preserving the whole thing versus just a portion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll start and then I'll let Avery speak and add if she would like. I mean, I think she can speak better to sort of the history of that section of the building, the architecture, that sort of thing. Excuse me. I think, you know, the parish hall is a reflection of the sort of association with a church. There is often a parish hall or a manse or something. So it kind of helps to tell the whole story. I think, you know, staff are open and willing, and we recognize, you know, the needs of growing parishes and the need of, you know, appropriate gathering space and all that sort of thing. I think if there was a proposal to renovate or demolish or develop that portion of the lot, I think there would be a certain amount of flexibility on the part of staff. I think if we're thinking about it from, you know, just a purely cultural heritage value perspective, I think it does help to tell the story. So I think it would be staff's preference to keep it in, but we are also open to exploring the option of removing it. Avery, do you have anything to add?
Sure, I'll just add a little bit of background on that structure itself. As it was mentioned, the parish hall was erected in 1910, and there is a section in the share about it. We know the architect. It was designed by John W.H. Watts. And some of the first subscribers to the building were Prime Minister Borden and Lady Borden. So we do find that there, you know, are direct associations with prominent people there. It does have cultural value on its own. So as Leslie mentioned, we're certainly do find some interest in it and value in it, but open to that discussion.
With the hall there is still obviously a very significant piece of land that could be developed. Does the local councillor have her hand up? Sorry, I'm looking at the map. Stephanie? No. Okay. Sorry, bear with me. I don't want to try to do something on the fly today. I hear the delegate's point, and I'll have some potential further thoughts on this tomorrow. Okay, thank you. I'm going to support this today, but thanks.
Thank you so much for those questions and comments. I don't see any other hands raised. I will be supporting this report before us. As we've heard multiple times before, the committee financial considerations are not a key characteristic of the Ontario Heritage Act, as well as I think we heard some comments also around the table around the fact that the Ontario Heritage Act does not preclude development or demolition. It just creates a process that ensures that there is public deliberation and debate before the disposition of cultural heritage assets and built heritage assets within the city. So based on those factors, I'll be supporting the report. But as we know, and I always take solace in this, we know that city staff is always willing to work with applicants who are willing, if they have ideas. There is flexibility from staff, and staff is always willing to work with applicants and property owners. And we've heard that time and time again at committee. So for this report, is this report carried? Carried. So this report will be submitted to City Council tomorrow on July 10th for consideration. Our next item is the designation of 50 Carruthers Avenue under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And we do have a presentation from staff.
I don't think there's a delegation anymore.
Okay. So before we go ahead with the presentation, the ward councillor has pointed out that we don't have a registered speaker online. We were waiting for her, but she has not joined. The only other speaker that is registered is Heritage Ottawa, and I'm assuming that they are supportive of this application. Seeing that there is no registered speaker, does the committee actually want to have a full presentation? I don't see interest in a full presentation. Are there any questions to staff? No questions. So is this report carried? Carried. So this report will be submitted to Ottawa City Council tomorrow on July 10th for consideration. Our last item is the designation of Lemieux Island, a water purification plant. And my understanding is that there is interest from Heritage Ottawa to speak on this item. So we will have a presentation from staff on Lemieux Island.
Thank you, Chair. This is the presentation for the report that is recommending the designation of Lemieux Island Water Purification Plant under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The facility is located on Lemieux Island, in the Ottawa River, just west of Le Breton Flats. It is a city-owned water treatment facility, and the designation of city-owned buildings is identified as a priority in the official plan. This designation has been undertaken in collaboration with Infrastructure and Water Services. I have my colleague, Paul Montgomery, Plant Manager, Water Purification, on the call here today. Next slide, please. Sorry, I skipped this one, but this is just a location map showing where it is, the west of Breton Flats. Next slide, please. There are 3 buildings that form the historic core of the plant. You can see them here: the pumping station, the chemical building, and the filter building. Next slide. This is an aerial image showing where those buildings that I just mentioned are located on the island. The bridge that you drive to the island or walk or bike to the island on is located on the right-hand side of the screen there, so you can orient yourself. Next slide. Through research and evaluation, staff have determined Lemieux Island Water Purification Plant has cultural heritage value, as it was the first water treatment plant in Ottawa. Following typhoid outbreaks in 1911 and 1912, which were caused by pollution in the Ottawa River, the establishment of a clean water supply became a priority. The plant gave residents access to clean drinking water, which reflects the progress of public health and sanitation in Ottawa at the time. It's also an excellent example of an industrial complex influenced by popular architectural styles of the early 20th century, in this case, Romanesque Revival and Art Deco. And it's an integral component of a group of historic industrial infrastructure that defines the character of this portion of the Ottawa River, which includes the Hintonburg Pumping Station, the Fleet Street Pumping Station, and its aqueduct. Next slide, please. The plant was designed and constructed by consulting engineering firm Gore, Naismith & Story. This firm designed several other Canadian water treatment plants, including the Glenmore Filtration Plant and the R.C. Harris Water in Calgary, and the R.C. Harris Water Treatment Plant in Toronto. Next slide. I'll just quickly go over some of the attributes we've identified for the buildings. For the filter buildings, the attributes include the prominent round arch windows, the main entrance with its portico and columns, and its decorative marble panels. Next slide. The attributes for the chemical building included smooth finished limestone blocks, the vertical bands of stone that help create that pattern of the building, and the defined proportions of the 1-story building with the 4-story tower. Next slide. The heritage attributes for the filter building, which is the most ornate building on the site, includes prominent front entrance with bronze doors, the decorative motifs and geometrical patterns, and this overall emphasis on flat vertical linearism. Next slide. In addition, the filter building also includes interior attributes such as the marble double return stairway with brass railings, the operating gallery indicator, and the landscape area to the west of the building, notably the pond, stone retaining wall, and plant banks. Next slide. So in conclusion, the staff recommend the new island water purification plant meets 8 of the 9 criteria under 0906 Ontario Heritage Act. Staff recommend that council issue a notice of intention to designate the property under Part 4 of the Act. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the report. We do have one registered speaker, Heritage Ottawa.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. I will be brief. It's been a long day. I would like to start by saying how much Heritage Ottawa appreciates all of the work that staff have done on all of the designations presented to you today. It is so thorough, and these reports have been such a joy to read. As I mentioned, I think it was in my email, some of us who have actually done some research on some of these buildings have learned a great deal more than we knew before. So it has been a real pleasure. I also want to acknowledge that staff have gotten in touch with Heritage Ottawa concerning our recommendation that the interior of the pumping building should also be designated, as well as the filter building. And I do understand some of the concerns, and I guess that leads me to the last remark that we made, and that is the need to document the mechanical and engineering aspects of some of the interiors. Even if we can't designate the interiors, we should be documenting them. And staff did acknowledge that this was important. I guess under the current circumstances, it may not be a top priority for staff, given their other priorities, but I think it should go somehow into the work plan. We started with the Alexandra Bridge talking about engineering heritage. There's a lot of engineering heritage in these buildings that we're dealing with today, plus the pumping station, the filter, Fleet Street plant, and the whole aqueduct system. It's quite unique, and I think there has been some documentation, but perhaps not as much as we need to have. So I would strongly recommend that staff do undertake this, and I do understand that it may not be a top priority just at the moment, but your support for that recommendation would be appreciated. I think that's probably all I have to say on the pumping station. I can't fail to mention the Hintonburg Community Association has a strong attachment to Laurier Island. We held a number of picnics, annual picnic, we called it the annual picnic, to try to establish it, since we had to get permission to do it, as I recall. Was held on the holiday Monday, August holiday Monday. We did it for several years until they closed the island. They're always closing that island for various and sundry things. They were replacing a bridge at that point, I think, either that or the water main. But anyway, it is a very important recreational space for both Hintonburg and Mechanicsville communities, and very highly prized by those of us who are familiar with it. And if you haven't been, you really should go.
Thank you so much for your delegation. I don't see any hands raised, so really appreciate all of the comment that Heritage Ottawa provided on multiple files today, and your ongoing work on an everyday basis. It's much appreciated. Are there any questions to staff on this item? I don't see any. So is the report carried? Carried. So this report will be submitted to City Council tomorrow on July 10th for consideration. There are no in-camera items. Are there any notices of motion? Seeing none. Are there any inquiries? Seeing none. Is there any other business? Seeing none, we are adjourned. May everybody have a wonderful summer, and we will meet again September 10th.
Thank you, Chair, and have a wonderful summer. Is back at you. Bye all.